Welcome to Film Strip and our reviews of the Alien movie franchise.
There is an explanation for this.
Featuring Nick.
Check it out. I am the ultimate badass.
And Jay.
This is so nuts. Listen to what you're saying.
Please note, these episodes will contain spoilers and in-depth discussion of the plots and characters of the films. All content used or discussed in this podcast are the property of their respective owners and used under the Fair Use Act, Section 504c2, Title 17.
Welcome to Film Strip. I'm Jay.
And I'm Nick.
And this is our review of Aliens, starring Sigourney Weaver, Carrie Henn, Michael Biehn, Lance Henriksen, Paul Reiser, and a host of others. Written and directed by James Cameron, released in July of 1986 on a budget of $18.5 million. It grossed over $131 million at the box office. Now, Nick, at the end of our Alien review, we were having a conversation as we were heading into the second entry here about should there have been a sequel or not. And according to what I've read and listened to in the extras and all that stuff, the producers, after the success of Alien, Geiler and Hill, planned to do one, but they held off on it, and the studio held off on it for quite some time. Now, that's really different from what we see today. Like, they're planning sequels before the movie hits the theaters today.
Yeah, usually stuff's all greenlighted like 3 weeks before it's released. you get that little Ain't It Cool News blurb where it's like, sequel already greenlit. Not even critics haven't even seen it.
They're already casting for Avengers 4, you know, so... But yeah, I mean, that is a little odd start to this thing. And I guess we need to talk about how this came to be a bit, and then how James Cameron got involved. Because, you know, if I just want to go ahead and throw it out there real quick, Arnold Schwarzenegger is partially to blame and to thank for Aliens, right?
Yeah, definitely. I guess after the movie got made, after Alien got made, and it was a critical and, you know, financial hit, you know, commercial hit, that Fox wanted to go on a sequel. But, you know, stuff changes at the Fox studios a lot. I mean, if you keep up on their record, I mean, there's always a new chairman, new CEO, new whatever. And that was the case with Fox, is back then was they kept on switching everybody, and Alien just kept on getting pushed back. And then when finally this one guy got in charge, I think his name was Norman Levy, and he was completely opposed to the idea of the Alien 2. And luckily, he kind of got scooted out of Fox, and then the new guy came in, and in a chance meeting, I guess, like Giller and Hill were in a parking lot of Fox, and he kind of brought up, like, hey, we ever going to do Alien 2? And Giller and Hill, who just got done doing a movie called Southern Comfort, were like, yeah, we got these ideas, and, you know, have you ever seen Southern Comfort? We kind of want to mix that with Magnificent Seven, and that's kind of how the ball got rolling with this.
Very cool, and that is the thing we must note from the outset here, that this film is very different from last film. It's almost a genre switch. Last time was a sci-fi gothic horror film, and this film is a combat action movie. And Gail Hurd, the producer, who was Cameron's wife at the time, and Cameron always talk about this movie that they set out to make a war movie. And Geiler and Hill were the part of that said, yeah, we're all about the combat. It doesn't need to be the same thing. Can't recreate that stuff. So, you know, do the thing. And that's how they, the fact that Cameron got involved, I mean, look, he came out of Roger Corman's studio, and he was a production designer, so everybody knew he knew what to do with the camera. He had written a draft of a script that ultimately became Rambo 2, and his version's a lot different, but it was well respected, and people thought it was really good. He'd done a lot of writing, so they brought him in just to write initially. They didn't, you know, they were going to go with the director, and it wasn't until some things freed up on the schedule that allowed him to be able to take the director's chair, and you know, he crafted this story with Geiler and Hill, and then they turned it over to him and said, go with it, and he wrote the screenplay. And I'm going to tell you, James Cameron, man, you know, people want to knock on him today, you know, for Titanic and all this other stuff, and I'm going to tell you, I like the dude's films, okay? Even the ones that aren't as good as the other ones, like, you know, look, Abyss is kind of drab, and it gets a little weird at the end. And Avatar, we've all seen that 100 times. But if you saw it in theaters, it looks amazing. You know, the guy is a visionary behind the camera. But there was a time when James Cameron was all about the story. And I feel like Terminator, Aliens, and then Terminator 2 really are the three of his films that, if you just pull the story out of them, the story is so amazing. And he really knows how to craft a battle.
when Fox actually decided to get rolling on Alien 2, which was what it was called at the time, Cameron was basically preparing to do Terminator, but Arnold all of a sudden got called in to do the sequel to Conan. So Cameron basically had 8 months to just kill. And if you know anything about James Cameron, the guy doesn't like to waste time. He's always got to be doing something, whether it's, filming a movie or going to the bottom of the deepest part of the ocean. I mean, this guy's always got to be doing something. So that's when he actually, whether, I'm not sure if it was him that contacted, Giller and Hill or vice versa, or maybe it was just both of them meeting at the right time, but they wanted Cameron to write the script to Alien 2, which Cameron renamed Aliens, and he, at the time, the 8 months that he only wrote about 90 pages into it. I mean, only 90 pages, but I guess it was only halfway done, and he gave it to Fox, and they loved it. They were like, this is awesome, this is great, and Cameron's like, I gotta go do Terminator now, and they were like, you know what, we're just gonna hold on to this. When you're done with Terminator, you're gonna come back and write this. And if Terminator does well, you know what, you can come and direct this too. So, like you said, if it wasn't for Arnold Schwarzenegger and basically being called back to do the sequel to Conan, Cameron would have been filming Terminator, and he would have never been able to even write this. And, who knows, he might have a Rennie Harlan movie or something, but...
You're to tell me now I have to thank Conan the Destroyer for this?
It did one thing right, but, I mean, you just...
Hey, Nick, I smell a trilogy in our future.
I don't know about that one. So. But you think about it, though, I mean, when you think about, like, Fox today, with, how they rushed out X3 and Wolverine and all these other movies, it was like, you hear about them, like, saying, oh, we're gonna wait. It's like, I opened up my mouth was open when I heard that. I'm like, Fox waiting for something? That's crazy.
Can I say this? That may be the only time in their history where that was true. And because, as we'll learn in the next film, when we talk about Alien 3, they had a release date before they had anything. Yeah. And they'd always want to do that. I mean, I think every X-Men film was that way. Fox gets involved with a property, and they do that. They will put out a release date, and that's what you have to meet. And they tend to hire people that can make things to that date. I think the fact that they were willing to go with, again, someone who was maybe a little bit of an unknown at that point, an unknown entity, they were going to hand them this franchise was a bold move, but it was the right move because it takes it in a different direction, like we've already set up, and ultimately it proved to be the wise choice because you put it in the hands of someone who's not only a capable technician, behind the camera, but is a capable storyteller and is able to get that out of actors. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the things he does with particularly the Ripley character, which I think are really interesting that we can probably see throughout his career here. But, Nick, I think before we get too much into this, we probably need a plot summary, and this is a long movie, so I have a feeling this one may go a bit, but can you please sum up what happens in Aliens?
Oh, yeah, I'll give it a try. The movie opens with a shot of Ripley's escape craft floating through empty space. The ship is taken over by a larger ship which dispatches a crew to investigate, and they find Ripley in the hypersleep chamber alive and well. While recuperating aboard the space station circling Earth, Ripley is informed that her space shuttle drifted through space undetected and by luck was discovered by a salvage crew 57 years after the events of the first film. Ripley is forced to face the executive board from Weyland-Yutani, and the board promptly ignores everything that Ripley says, claiming that she set the ship to self-destruct for reasons unknown. She is then stripped of all ranks in order to undergo psych evaluations. Ripley pleads with the head of the board to check out LV-426, but he laughs at her and says he doesn't have to. There are 50 to 60 families already living on the colony, terraforming the planet of LV-426. Sometime later, Ripley is visited by Carter Burke, a Weyland-Yutani rep, and Lieutenant Gorman of the Colonial Space Marines. It turns out they have lost contact with the colony on LV-426, and they would like her to be a consultant for the group of Marines sent to investigate the matter. Ripley refuses at first, but soon reconsiders after a bad dream and the promise that any alien encountered would be destroyed. After arriving on LV-426, Ripley, Burke, and the Marines, along with the android Bishop, discover the colony is abandoned. They see several facehuggers in a colony lab and read reports of the colonists who encountered the species. The only colonist they find is a young girl who goes by the name Nuke. The Marines soon discover that the colonists are located in an atmospheric processor in the colony. The entire Marine platoon goes to investigate. They quickly discover that the colonists have all met the same fate that Kane did in Alien. The aliens soon attack the Marines, and many are killed. Only Hicks, Hudson, and Vasquez make it out alive due to the fast-thinking Ripley who drives the vehicle into the nest. Hicks takes command, only opposed by Burke, and deems the retreat and total nuclear destruction of the colony to be the only course of action. The dropship makes its way over to rescue the crew, only to crash due to an alien who was on board. Ripley investigates the colony transcripts and discovers that the colony finding the aliens was no mistake, that Burke ordered the colonists to investigate the derelict spaceship. To make matters worse, Bishop informs the group that the atmospheric processor has been damaged and will detonate in a matter of hours. With no chance of rescue, Bishop volunteers to remote pilot the remaining dropship to their rescue. Ripley and Newt try to get some rest in the now fortified compound, but are attacked by facehuggers. Ripley is able to alert the Marines via fire alarm, who then rescue them and kill the facehuggers. Ripley informs the Marines that Burke sent in the facehuggers in an attempt to get the alien through quarantine. Dozens of aliens attack through the ceiling, and Hudson, Burke, Vasquez, and Gorman are all eliminated by the aliens while Newt is captured. Ripley and a severely injured Hicks make their way back to Bishop just as the dropship arrives. Ripley orders Bishop to take her to the alien nest at the processing station. She rescues Newt and then runs into the alien queen in her egg chamber. Ripley sets fire to the entire nest, and they make their way back to Bishop, but not before the queen tears herself free from her birthing chamber. Bishop picks up Ripley and Newt, and they escape the planet moments before the atmospheric processor explodes. Back on the Sulaco, the alien queen, which stowed away in the dropship landing gears, rips Bishop in half and goes after Ripley and Newt. Ripley then uses one of the Marines' power loaders to fight against the Queen, ultimately throwing them both into the airlock. Ripley climbs out of the loader, opens a hatch, and expels the alien Queen into space. Ripley, Newt, and a comatose Hicks, along with a barely functioning Bishop, prepare for hypersleep as the Sulaco turns for home.
Well, that's a heck of a plot, man. A lot of stuff going on in this film, pretty dense. And now we got to talk from the top here. You know, there's two versions of this film. There's the theatrical version, and then in 2003 they released the director's cut, which restored around 17 minutes or so back into the film. And I think what you summarized there is really the major beats of it. But which version did you watch?
I watched both of them multiple times.
Well, I've seen them both multiple times as well. Until I acquired the Alien DVD set, I had never seen the director's cut. So seeing it, I've seen that one more now, I think, than the theatrical. But I think the differences, with a couple of notable exceptions, are fairly negligible. They're mostly just scenery and that kind of stuff. But there's a couple of things we'll want to call out going through this debate. I guess we just get right into this, Nick. We open up with a very similar opening to what we had last time. It's kind of a slow crawl and the vastness of space, and you see this tiny ship wandering out there. And if you've seen the original Alien and you remember, that's the escape pod. And then we go inside, and sure enough, there's Ripley and that dang cat in that hypersleep chamber.
Cat.
Yeah. Did also notice something too. The hypersleep, and we never talked about it at the end of the last one. You know, when we opened up that last movie, they were all almost totally nude. You know, and Ridley even talked about that. In this one, like, she's wearing this whole choir gown thing, and I thought that's an interesting choice, because I noticed it at the end of the last movie too. And I think maybe that, I don't know if I'm getting into nitpicky stuff here or not, but I just noticed that's a change in tone already, because, you know, unlike the last film where sexuality was a big undercurrent of that movie, and to deny that is just ridiculous. That's not present in this film, and I think you get that right from the opening scene, don't you?
Yeah, but again, I don't think you really need to redo that again. I mean, with Alien and the sexual imagery and all the, undertones and subcontext, I mean, to do that again, I mean, what would be the point? I mean,
well, no, you're right, but it is an interesting note, because you're talking about in the first 2 minutes of the film here, they're already setting you up that this is going to be a different ride this time. And, not all sequels do that. That was something I just noticed coming out, that this felt like a different film straight ahead. Now, Deep Safe Space Salvage Crew, I got to ask, is this happenstance, or has Weyland-Yutani been looking for what's left of the Nostromo all this time? And, what happens here?
It's never really made clear. According to Weyland-Yutani, who, they're a big corporation, they're probably just trying to cover their butts. She just happened to, slip by unnoticed, which, to me, it's like, okay, you got an escape vehicle. There's got to be some type of beacon or whatever. I mean, come on, a derelict spaceship that's been on this planet for how long has a freaking signal that a space shuttle can, pick up. And you're telling me this, space shuttle, this rescue thing, didn't have something similar to that, which, but I don't think you can really fault the movie for it or even the writing on it, because I think if you really dig deep into the movie and you think about like what this corporation is, I have always assumed that, what, they left her out there to die. That there was really no point in picking up Ripley or whoever the survivors were. I mean, from what we saw in Alien, the company knew everything. I think that Mother or Ash or, both of them were sending information back as it was happening. So there's no reason to think that the company didn't know about this safety, or the shuttle, this escape shuttle. But what would be the chances of the aliens piloting the space shuttle? I mean, that's none. A company is probably playing the odds. They learned that the Nostromo blew up and there's an escape shuttle. Why even bother picking up the space shuttle? I mean, why risk why spend the money to go out there and get it? And why, reopen a book that you want to keep closed? I think that from Weyland-Yutani's point of view, it was, yeah, that really sucks. The thing that we wanted isn't there. It's gone. And there's a survivor. Well, there's no survivors. Just let her be.
Well, and that's an interesting point. The next thing is, and this is another reason you're in a different movie. What's the iconic scene from Alien? It's the chest burster, right? Everybody knows that scene. I mean, that's, even if you hadn't seen the movie, everybody had seen some version of that at some point, right? Well, they go with the fake out right early. Ripley wakes up in the space hospital or whatever. She's laying there, and then the nurse is talking to her, and at first you're like, okay, what's going on? And I don't recognize this place, blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden she starts convulsing. And immediately I'm going, there's no possible way that they're going down this road, this early. And it is a fake out. But although she wakes up and it's the same nurse that sort of goes, do you need something to help you sleep? So you realize part of the information you got is accurate, but that she is haunted. And my only thought is, has she had the same nightmare the whole time in hypersleep? And if so, oh my goodness. Yeah,
I think that's actually kind of something that they hint at the whole time. And, as we get into it a little bit later, probably one of her reasoning, the reasoning she actually decides to go back and fight this thing later in the movie, are these dreams. I mean, do you sleep? Do you dream in hypersleep? I mean, I guess that's kind of a question they ask throughout the whole movie, but
sounds like a Philip K. Dick short story.
Yeah, but I mean, that would be just a terrifying thing to experience. You're in hypersleep for who knows how long, and you're just dreaming of the same nightmare over and over and over again.
Yeah, but of course, as we learn, that's not to be the case. Now we get the first thing that's part of the director's cut. That's the inserted scene, and I got to tell you, it's one of those things I wish they had left in there too, because it says a lot about Ripley. And Sigourney Weaver has always lamented that this got cut from the theatrical version. But we see Ripley sitting on a park bench, looking at what we think is a park, and it turns out to just be a hologram. She's basically just sitting in an office. But we meet Carter Burke, the smarmy businessman rep from the company, and he's trying to talk to her about, we got to go meet the board, this inquest, it'll be quick, yada yada, and all she wants to know about is her daughter. And I thought that was a really neat drop to put in there, that Ripley had left behind a daughter on Earth.
Yeah, definitely. And then she, Burke has the information with him, and he shows it to her, and what do we find out? She finds out that her daughter is dead, that she, died an old woman in Wisconsin, and just, she had no kids, no nothing and stuff. And, hearing about that, I mean, what a heartbreaking thing to hear, this.
Well, I mean, Nick, relate for a minute. You've got a young son. Let's say you woke up tomorrow and realized you had been asleep for 57 years and he had lived a life and passed on.
I wouldn't even care about going to the board meeting at that time. I would just be like, screw everything, whatever, I wouldn't even care about going to the board meeting for Weyland-Yutani. I'd just give him my middle finger and say, stick it. I'm out of here.
And here's the thing, she doesn't. And that's the whole time he's going on and on about this board meeting. And we should say the 57 years thing was dropped in the dream, so we figure he probably visited her, told her that, and she passed out from it during the day. And now she's having to hear this again, and that is still lost on her, the idea that she's been out there for nearly 6 decades. And I got to tell you, I thought that was a master stroke. And I don't know if that's Cameron or if that's Hill and Geiler that came up with that, but that was a genius idea.
It helps so much with how the plot moves forward, and everything that's going on with the Weyland-Yutani company and what's going on back at LV-426. Just being able to just fast forward that many years, I mean, it's a great device. And, something that, I wouldn't even thought of, who would have thought that, I mean, we saw the hypersleep chambers and stuff, but in the first movie, but I never put that together until I saw this movie that, that's the whole reason they use hypersleep is so they don't age. So basically it feels instantaneous, and basically Ripley, instantaneously aged 57 years. I mean, it's insane just to think about.
Yeah, and I mean, that allows them to get away with so much in the plot, though. I mean, you can advance technology, because look, let's face it, between 1978 and 1985 when this was shot, we'd come a long way in special effects. We'd come a real long way. And we'd had all three of the Star Wars films, and they had done everything, and then, ILM had grown, and we had Terminator now. We'd done a lot of really cool stuff. And so to show for that advance in movie technology, you want to advance the world a little bit. And it also puts, and I think you brought this up before, it puts distance on that story. So now that there's 2.5 generations of people that don't really know what the Nostromo was. It's just this old file hanging around the company. I mean, the company's changed CEOs how many times during that time? That puts all that distance out there, and it immediately does something else. Ripley ended the last film, alone. And even though she's now surrounded by people again, and she's, a couple 100,000 miles from Earth, but she's in Earth orbit, she's still totally alone in the world. And that's sort of her. I mean, if you're going to do the fish out of water story, I think it's a neat way to do it, because it sets her up as immediately the lead character. But no, he tells her this about her daughter, and she's really sad about it. And the next thing we cut to is what we normally would have gone to after he met her, is the inquest. And she says, we've been here for 3 hours. How many different times do I explain it to you? And again, I love how in the future boardroom, everybody's still smoking cigarettes. We still hadn't kicked the addiction in the 23rd century or whatever this is. And they're all sitting there, in this smoke-filled room. It's so 80s. It feels like any 80s, quote, business movie that you saw. This boardroom with crap all over the table, and there's people over there figuring stuff up, and you've got an accountant talking numbers, and you've got a PR person and a VP here, and all this. These people just going at her, going, what you saying, it makes no sense, lady.
Yeah, I mean, but as much as it's like cliched, it's so realistic, though, at least from my opinion, with dealing with, businessmen and CEOs and stuff. I mean, this is exactly what they would be telling her. And this kind of question I have that I'll ask you is, what does the company know? Are they just like, this woman's crazy, she's, telling us some, BS story she probably made up in her head? Or do they know about it and are just basically playing her and being like, we don't know what you're talking about. We don't know what you're talking about.
Well, here's the thing, and this is an interesting point. You got to figure that their idea of the flight recorder is not something that was necessarily physically on the ship. And if Mother is not just a computer program, it's a thing that is in communication with the command back on Earth, that all this information was being fed back to them. I mean, they know that they sat down on LV-426 and there was no reason listed for it. And that they took off, and then several hours later, she detonated the ship by turning off the cooling system to the... So that's all they know. And like you had said before, this happened so long ago and was such a failed idea, if you will. How many people's deaths did this get buried under? So I'm of the mind that at this point, this is what we're supposed to show here, that the bureaucracy of the world won't allow us to believe a story that seems so ridiculous like this. You know what I mean?
I know what you mean, but I'm going to take a different stance on it. I think that the company does know. I think that they're just going through the motions. They can't admit to Ripley that, oh, yes, we picked up that all. We have the file on it here, and, you did a brave thing getting rid of it. Or they're not going to say their true intentions of being like, you stupid woman, why did you kill it? We wanted that thing. They're playing it smoothly because, I mean, there's one big clue in this whole scene that leads me to believe that is they don't press charges against Ripley. She blows up a they say million in the movie, that'd actually be billion. I mean, we gotta adjust that for inflation. But, she destroys their multi-billion-dollar, mining thing and ship, and there's 6 people, 5 people in an android. The sentence in law would be with an android, but there's 5 people that are missing and are dead. I mean, why wouldn't she be charged with something? I mean, if you go off on a work excursion and 5 people are dead when you come back, I mean, you're going to be charged with something. I mean, there's going to be some type of investigation, and they want to close this file quick. They sit there and go, okay, you're going to have psych evaluations, in which I don't think there'd be any real who is this guy to make that, recommendation? He's a friggin' board member, and they strip her of all ranks, and I think they just send her off to die. I think they're just like, go work in a warehouse or whatever. I think by doing the psychic evaluations, stripping her of ranks, they're stripping her of all credibility. So you know what? Go and tell your, story to TMZ or whatever, because no one's going to believe you.
Well, that's an interesting take, and I don't think you're wrong for that. I'll tell you this. Cameron intends for this whole movie to work like an allegory for Vietnam. And not specifically about the politics of it, but in the broader strokes. This idea of the highly mechanized technical army going in to fight a primitive enemy and not being able to hang with them, and the disconnect between the bureaucrats and the people that have been on the front lines who may be telling them, hey, we need to do this differently. These people, this thing is different. You've never faced anything like this. And the board being the Congress at the time, or the people going, no, we got this covered, and you're running the war from the state house instead of from the front lines, So I think you can read it in multiple ways. I've always kind of looked at it as this is, Cameron again taking the take of the idea that bureaucracy gets in the way of what really happens oftentimes, and we miss facts because we won't go there with people, even though it seems completely implausible what they're telling us. And I think you're right that they just want to shovel this under the desk, get her put away, but they can't really do anything to her, so they do the only thing they can do. They basically turn her into a warehouse worker. And I love this scene, and I want to tell you, one thing that got cut is they cut the suspension out of the theatrical cut, and I wish they had left that in, because it lets you know something else about the company. You asked, who are these people? Apparently they own everybody and everything.
But another part I like about the scene, though, is when she's going through it all, you're seeing the pictures of the crew behind her. I mean, they're reminding you of the first Alien movie. You see Lambert up there in Dallas, and Kane and everything, and I just think it's a great little nod that they have to the first movie. Is just seeing that behind you. I mean, I don't know, at least with me, it just it resonates that, this is a true sequel. They're not just going through the motions like a Halloween movie or a Freddy movie. They're really acknowledging what happened before, and they're moving on from it.
And I love how on the screen you get the file closed, scrolls across, and it's little dot matrix heaven there.
Oh, I love that, though. I love that.
It is great, but from that moment on, you're now in a different movie. Like, that's the last thing we're going to talk about from that, and then that is over here now. And we get to this whole confrontation she has with Van Leeuwen, the head of the board, and that's when he drops this idea of terraforming on her. And I would tell you, I like this. Again, it's a plot device, Nick, but it's a smart one. It gives you a way to have population in a otherwise uninhabitable area.
No, it's a great thing, and it's I think that's just great about this whole movie. I'm just going to kind of rant right now on it. Is there's so many questions that you have, the way we're going back and forth with, did the company know? Yes, they knew. No, they don't. They don't know anything. They know more than what they're showing. But it's not like a plot hole. It's not, the writer being lazy or anything like that. It's set there for you to guess, because you wouldn't know. If you're Ripley, you wouldn't know at this point. And I just think it's when they say there's 50 to 60 families on this planet. Now you're questioning why the hell are those families there? Okay, yeah, they're terraforming. For what purpose, though? What purpose are they terraforming there? Is that just because of a planet that they know of, because it's a small planetoid that, let's just, we'll do the terraforming on the smaller planets, like they're kind of building their way up? Or is there another reason that they're at LV-426? And from what we gather, how far away LV-426 is, at least in my opinion, there's an ulterior motive to why the families and they're colonizing LV-426.
What's that?
I think, one of the questions that are going to come up is that from the first movie Alien, there was a homing beacon that the crew followed down to the planet. Now, if the company was still looking for the alien, they would be able to find it pretty easily. I mean, the Nostromo found it. Why wouldn't an advanced science or bioweapon ship not be able to find this? Well, I think they knew where it was, and I think they almost kind of used that homing beacon as over there's where the aliens are. we're going to put the colony on the other side of the planet. They didn't put the colony there for them to be massacred. I mean, as much as Weyland-Yutani is an evil company, I don't think they're that evil. I think what their goal was not to have a Nostromo incident happen again. I think that they want this alien species, but they're not going to send a ship down there and bring it back to Earth, not bring it back to, one of the stations closer to Earth. They're going to do the stuff there on that planet. And what a better way to do it than to actually make the planet hospitable, turn the, whatever it is there to actual oxygen and, make it a place where they can actually set up base and actually study this creature in its derelict spaceship and to, continue research there.
Well, that's an interesting theory. I mean, you can infer that, and I see how you can get that after having watched this enough and thinking about it and things. But the way it plays in the movie is that they don't believe her at that thing, and they don't know anything about this deal until she says something about it. And then it's the next scenes that that got cut out of the theatrical. They take us to LV-426, and you see these engineers walking around, and you got all these kids playing in the air ducts and all that stuff. And there's this whole bit about this guy's going out there because he got sent on company orders to go check out a signal. Does he get to keep what he finds or whatever? And the whole the engineer guy is basically like, I don't care, whatever happens. So that sets up the company as being very direct, that they hear this stuff from her, and then they go, well, you know what? Okay, yeah, we will check that out. Because isn't that totally what the bureaucracy does, Nick? Like, no, we're not going to look into that, and then they're already looking into it.
Yeah, true, but I guess, if we're going to maybe kind of just jump ahead just a little bit, we find out that Burke was the one that sent them out there. And That kind of goes back to the whole point I was making, that the company knew about it. Well, they weren't playing their hands. I don't think Burke knew about it. And I think Burke kind of jumped the gun when he found this out, as being like this is going to be a cash grab for me, man. This is worth millions to the bioweapons division. He went behind Weyland-Yutani's back, or didn't really notify him, sent out the colonists because it was all on his orders to send those colonists out there. And I think, once everything got screwed up, it all basically fell back on him. And I think that's why he went down there. Well,
that's interesting. We'll get back to that. You're right. That is jumping ahead a little bit. Let's talk about those two scenes, though, that we do get on LV-426, where we actually meet the girl there for the first time, and this is in the director's cut again, but it's basically her dad, mom, and her brother going out and they discover the derelict spaceship again. They're following the site.
Yep, it's great to see that spaceship again. I mean, before I saw the director's cut, I remember seeing the theatrical cut so many times, it was like, you almost kind of forget about it when you're watching Aliens, and then all of a sudden you see it, and it's like, oh man, that's so nice to see that ship again. But it's different now. As you can tell, something was happening on that planet, whether it was the terraforming causing something, but the spaceship's in a different position. And you can see there's actually smoke and almost like volcanic activity going around it. But I think it's a great, I like the scene. I don't know if it was necessary to have it. I think he might have been right in cutting it, because it almost, jumping from Ripley to the planet back to Ripley, it's just, when you watch the whole movie in a whole, that seems just to be kind of a misstep, because because you're just kind of discovering things with Ripley throughout the whole movie.
You're right, and I think that's why it was. The thing with Ripley's daughter would have been a good thing to add back in, and the thing with her being fired by the board, that gets said again later, but it would have been neat to hear them say it to her, because it sets up that board member to be pretty harsh or whatever. So this is the first time when I feel like, this didn't need to be in there. This kind of kills the pacing, because Ripley, in addition to being the main character, and that's clear from the start of this thing, is also the eyes of the audience, because she's been out of the loop for 60 years. So she's having to learn things, so that gives reason for her to ask questions that we all have and bring us along with her. You know what I mean? Like, she's her own plot device there, and I like that. And I'm with you. I'd rather see it from her eyes, because I think it unfolds either way. You get it either way. Because it's almost over-explaining, because they basically say everything that happens here later on in like 3 different scenes. So it's a little much, but it's okay to have in there. It's kind of neat, but it's much like a lot of things thrown back in director's cuts. It's a little unnecessary.
I don't know. It's just, I think it's kind of cheap when you're showing a lot of kids running around. Yeah. Like, when you come back later and when you realize what happened there, it kind of, I think it's just kind of a little cheap shot to give the audience with the children. I mean, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I never really thought much more about that. I did like I was almost okay with the first part of the scene, the part where you're in the complex and you set up the engineers and they're talking about something, but I don't know that you can have that without the other piece. So in my mind, you just cut it all because you don't need it anyway, because it's fairly self-explanatory what happens. Like, I didn't need the guy to take a half bite out of the donut for me to later realize when I see the half donut on his desk, like, oh, that's where that came from. I mean, I know Cameron probably spent like 8 hours thinking of that, but and another 6 setting the lights around it to shoot it, but I didn't need to see it. It didn't do anything for me. Because what I want to get back to is Ripley. Ripley is in her apartment. She's still having these nightmares and stuff, and she gets visited by Burke and Lieutenant Gorman, from the Colonial Marines. Now I'm like, okay, Colonial Marines. Now here's the thing. The first thing I noticed about Gorman, his uniform looks almost exactly like a United States Marine from 1986. So I said, well, one of two things I know about this. Either we took over the whole world or everybody just adopted our colors. One or the other. But what do you think of the Colonial Marines? The idea that the Colonial Marines would be hanging out with a company man.
I kind of gather that they're kind of one and the same. I think that, the Colonial Marines are just an extension of Weyland-Yutani, that they're a military group.
Interesting.
You could even say like a rent-a-cop group. I think they're all in cahoots. I think, Weyland-Yutani is Earth, and Earth is Weyland-Yutani, and this is just another extension of it.
It is. I like the fact that, though, it's not just the company pushing everything. Now we've got, like, the police. You got the authorities involved, right? So you're not just going to ask Ripley to go back to this place alone. You're going to send her with armed guards. And their whole setup is that we lost contact with the colony. Now, the engineer in the cutscene before says, then this is the one thing he does set up, which I do like, is that it takes 2 weeks to get an answer out here. So there's a distance, and I like that realistic point there, is that you can't just beam a message across space. So I'm going, well, okay, has it been 2 weeks or more? Now, how do they know they've lost contact? So there's been some time passed here, but we don't know how much. Yeah. But I do like that we just sort of fast forward ahead. It sort of throws you into the idea that people are trying to go on with their lives. This is what happens. And the whole setup is that we've lost contact and we want you to go because we don't think there's anything. It could just be a down transmitter, but if it's not, then I'd really like you to be there as the expert, right? So it tells me two things. These Marines have never seen this thing, and the company still has never laid eyes on this creature. They still don't know what they're dealing with, to borrow a line from Ash.
But kind of like back to the LV-426 scene, isn't this a lot more eerie, though, just to hear it as in, hey, we lost contact with them, than to kind of seeing it? I mean, even just showing what they showed, especially with Nuke's father getting the facehugger, I kind of like, your imagination is so much more freaky than, what they're going to show you on the screen. I mean, what you're thinking about what happened. I mean, there's so many different theories I heard when this movie came out as far as what happened. Did the aliens come from the derelict spaceship? Did someone get a facehugger and bring it back, or a little bit of both? Or I don't know. I like the way when they just say we lost contact with them, and it's just they need Ripley because they're it could be a down transmitter, but if it's not, we don't know what the hell's going on, and you're kind of the only person that might. So, well,
you know what? You bring up a good point. Usually, the rule in movies is show don't tell, except when you're trying to build tension. And if you do it right, you can create tension by telling something that you didn't show that sets a mood. All of a sudden you're talking about that. We don't have to check out that planet. Everything's fine, and then the next scene, everything's not so fine. Mm-hmm. And she knows immediately. You can tell by the look on her face and the way Sigourney Weaver plays it. It's like, oh shit, we're gonna do this again. Really? And we all know as the audience, oh man, the aliens are back. Oh wow, how bad is it going to be? Because you already know there's going to be more than one just by the title. So it's okay. How bad is it? How bad is it going to be? And I love how though she doesn't just immediately say, yeah, let's saddle up and go, because that would happen today in a movie, that directed by McGee. Like she would already have her gun loaded and be pointing it and cocking it at people for no reason at all, and they'd be running out the door together, right? But
they'd walk into the door and she'd be sitting there with a gun loaded, going, "I knew you would be coming."
She'd be cleaning the futuristic 45. Yeah, that's exactly what would happen. But she's like, no, I'm not doing it. Forget it. I got other stuff to do. And Burke's
I love what she says. I love what she says. She looks at Burke and goes, "You threw me to the wolves, and now you want me to go back out there. You guys hung me out to dry. You guys sat there pointing your fingers at me, saying I was a liar, I needed a psych evaluation, and now you come back crawling to me saying, we might be wrong.
Well, yeah, and then he dangles that carrot back in front of her and get you reinstated as a flight officer. And so that answers her questions. Like, well, why didn't you do that before, loser? You were supposed to be on my side.
Well, I think that actually infuriates her more because she's like, I said no, I mean no, and she kicks him out. I think just like right there, it was like, now you're going to, give me back what you took away from me to help you out. It's like, get out of here. Oh, there's also another part I want to bring up though too, is when Burke's bringing up her psych evaluations to her, how he somehow has access to her medical records. I guess HIPAA doesn't exist in the future, but
good point. But yeah, he talks about it. He's doing everything he can to try to goad her into this, and she's not taking it. And that automatically tells you something else. Ripley's growth at the end of Alien did not get lost in hypersleep, and it wasn't temporary.
No, she's not going to take crap. She's not going to sit there and, listen to guys saying, yeah, I wet the bed because of this. Well, you know what? You're not going to guilt me into this or make me feel ashamed. Get out of here. Leave me alone.
Yeah, exactly. That's the whole bit. But as it turns out, it only takes one more bad dream, and she's like, screw it. We're going. But I love the whole conversation on the video phone. It's like, promise me you're not going out there to take him back. Not study. You're going out there to kill him, right? And he's like, yeah, you got my word. And she's like, I'm in. And then she just hangs up, and then that's it. And it's like, okay. And automatically well, that is a damn lie. And it's a lie. Because why else? If they were just going to blow it all up, they would just go blow it up.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't know if they just go in there and blow it up. I mean, there might be colonists and stuff still alive, but to me, I don't think they would be. If they were going in there just to exterminate, they wouldn't be bringing her away.
Yeah, that's the thing. But you get that feeling, and you're wondering the only person you really want to trust as a viewer in this is Ripley at this point, right?
Well, you can't trust the company at this point. I mean, everything they just did to her. And also now they lost contact with the colony and everything that happened in Alien as far as with Ash and this whole, signal and what they knew, didn't know. I mean, she has no reason to believe him, but I think she doesn't have to believe him. She's doing this for herself that, she can't get over the dreams. It's killing her from the inside still. And, even though she killed that alien at the end of Alien, she still never faced this thing directly. I mean, even the whole movie of Alien, she was always away from the incident. Everybody around her was getting killed, and she was always away. It wasn't until the very end that she was able just to get the thing out of there, and then, that was ending. Her story ended on for Alien, but she needs to face this thing, and, I guess Burke even kind of says it. You need to beat this thing, get back on the horse, and, take charge of your life, and I guess that's probably the best way to do it.
And that's not wrong advice, because that is what she needs to do. Because you see, killed. I mean, she blew the thing out of the airlock. She never saw it disintegrate or die. She just got away from it. So basically, all she did was just get away. That'd be like swimming away from Jaws, but knowing that it's still there, and you decide to move to Nebraska.
It almost be like like if you take it to a slasher movie perspective, where if the survivor girl has her whole family and friends and everybody killed by this thing, and then she runs away from him in the end, and that's the end of the movie.
Yeah.
It's like, that guy's still technically out there. That threat's still out there, even though it's far away, but you're going to have that in the back of your mind all the time. And, she's probably got the worst case of post-traumatic stress syndrome you could have. I mean,
that, again, back to the war metaphor. It's the old soldier needing to go exercise those demons, and you can't keep all that stuff inside. I mean, that was a major theme. It's still a major theme for soldiers today. It was a major theme for our Vietnam vets. And I mean, that was part of it. And much like those vets, Ripley's been completely mistreated by the people she trusted and the people she thought would be there for her. And so this is why she decides, I think you made a point, she decides to do this for herself. And I think you're right. She comes to the decision that I have got to have peace with this once and for all. So I'm going out there, because if they're packing half of what they say they got with these Colonial Marines, which just the name of that makes you think ultimate killing machine people, then yeah, we're okay. Because I mean, look, if you're going to model, nothing against any of the military, they all do a great job and they fight hard and stuff like that. But the Marines are just the tough, the dudes you throw in there when you just need it messed up. I mean, Marines are the elite ground force of our armed forces. So that immediately evokes an idea of what's in your head, of what you get with those guys, right? So she had to be, thinking the same thing. And I think that works for the audience too. And I like that.
And even from another perspective, what does she have to lose at this point?
Yeah, she's got nothing left except that dumb cat. So, and which she probably says is staying there.
She doesn't like that cat either. But she has no family. She's in a foreign place, in a foreign world, in a foreign time, and this thing's eating her up. So like I said, what else does she have to lose?
Exactly. And so then we get into the space travel and the big what the designers call the big flying gun known as the Sulaco. And I gotta say, ship design, once again, I love it, man. It does look like a big flying shotgun.
What a better way to show like what this group is about is they fly around in a big gun.
Well, yeah, and that's exactly what Cameron wanted to evoke. I mean, they kept coming up with different ship design, and he was like, it should be people saddling up, going to war, they're flying a big gun. And so that's what they came up with, and it looks fantastic. It's another one of those great Star Wars shots. And in the director's cut, you get a lot more around the ship. You know, you get to see all their weapons lined up, and you see the area, and this idea that they're in this, you know, before the Nostromo felt like, you know, it was a big flying tow truck with, you know, enough space for humans to survive on, not exactly to be comfortable on. This thing looks like a cruise ship going into space. I mean, it's decked out and modern technology or modern looking tech and all that. And I gotta say, for something that's, you know, 26 years old at the recording of this podcast, Nick, holds up pretty good. It still looks good.
My only question is, man, that's a big-ass ship for only like 12 guys.
Yeah, no, but that's a lot of it. Apparently, fuel is not a concern in the future either, because they're not. It's not like they're hauling a brigade out there. I mean, you know, they're taking a platoon, so it is a little much. But you know what? I like it. It gives that menacing presence. Again, that idea of the futuristic, decked out warlords basically going to war with the primitive society, and even all this stuff they've got is not going to matter once they get there. It's not going to. Well, as Ripley said in the boardroom, you can kiss all this goodbye. One of those things gets in here, it don't matter.
Crap that you think's so important.
You just kiss all this goodbye. So, and I mean, she's right, but I love how they wake everybody up here. We get I love the whole, you know, the big hyper sleep chambers opening up and stuff, and all the Marines start to wake up. And I got to tell you, Sergeant Apone, Al Matthews, himself, a veteran of the United States Marine Corps, perfectly cast as the sergeant for the group, because Gorman's the lead officer, he's the lieutenant, but the sergeant is the one that gets the troops mobilized and then works with the lieutenant on the plans and everything. And I love his whole little opening speech here. You know, it's this getting everybody up.
Yep, he's the first one out of bed, and right away he's chomping on a cigar.
But I love his whole bit. You know, you meet all these people, and I mean, there's some rough looking dudes. It's like a biker's gang in a lot of ways. You know, you got Drake and Wispowski getting up. You get Vasquez. We'll get to her in a second, and Bill Paxton.
Yeah, him and Apone in the beginning. They got this rapport together, and it's like, "Ooh, the floor too cold for you? You want me to fetch your slippers?" And Hudson's like, "Yeah, would you, Sarge?" And he gets.
The whole back and forth, and then, you know, you get Corporal Hicks in there. That's Michael Bean, who always looks like he's waking up with a 3-day hangover. And I just this guy, wow, the guy looks, and Ripley gets up, and so you get all these people together, and you see these, you know, two Marines, the two of the female Marines getting dressed, and they're like, "Hey, who's that?" And they're talking about Ripley, and automatically the Marines are like, "She says she's on Alien, yes, so what?" And they all act like, no big deal. You know? So how did you read that? Did you think, okay, this isn't a group of experienced soldiers that's seen this crap before, or these guys just think they're better than they really are?
I think at this point in, you know, human history in this movie, the whole idea of aliens is something that they've encountered. I mean, they haven't encountered this specific type of aliens, but from what I was gathering from the actual Space Marines is they've encountered aliens before. So it's kind of like, wow, she saw something, whoop-de-doo, you know, God, we've seen stuff before too. Nothing probably is, you know, obviously not as dangerous as what they're going to encounter in a few minutes, but yeah, I mean, I think they were just kind of like, yeah, okay, it'd be like, you know, you coming over and being like, I drove a car. It's like, yeah, I drive a car every day. Congratulations, man, you know.
Yeah.
Been there, done that, but I think that they're kind of putting on a little show for Ripley's sake as well, because, you know, right away, you know, she was like, "Oh, who's Snow White?" And then she starts doing pull-ups right away and stuff. I think it's a little bit of posturing.
I think Vasquez is just bad anyway. I mean, it doesn't the guy say that to her anyway? You're just too bad, Vasquez. You know, and she.
Well, he goes. That's a great movie. It's you ever been mistaken for a man, Vasquez? And she looks at Hudson and goes, "No, have you?"
Yeah, I mean, yeah. There's all that humor, and Cameron's full of that stuff.
You know, I'm gonna say too. I know there's a lot of people out there that rip on his dialogue and say he's not a good writer. He can't really write interactions. I tell you the truth. You know what? You hang out with any people, you know, like, you know, blue collar, people, that who I am, it's like, that's interactions that I would find very common at a bar, at a rec room, at a gym. It's like, there's no over macho, egotistical talk here. That's just how some people talk. So it's just one of those things I've read on the internet or heard on other podcasts where people are like, oh, James Cameron can't, screw you. Yeah, he can.
Well, what's funny to me is that he got Jeanette Goldstein, who, if you've ever seen her in anything else, and yes, you have seen her in a lot of James Cameron stuff, she's a very feminine-looking woman. I mean, she's very, very pretty, and if you know her background, she came from, like, theater arts, and, I mean, she's very dainty as a person. But they rip her. I mean, she is ripped in this movie, and she's got that short haircut, and she's talking with that heavy Spanish accent, and she's just hardcore, And immediately, and I can't help but do this. I've said before, offline with you, we have a conversation, is Ripley the prototype for Sarah Connor or vice versa, and which one leads to which? But I got to tell you, there's a little bit of or a little bit of Private Vasquez that makes its way over to T2 with Sarah Connor, particularly the way Linda Hamilton gets all built up for that.
Both of them got those ripped arms, man. They're pretty jacked,
Yeah, I mean, but you get the feeling immediately, like, Hudson maybe, I don't know, he may just be the goofball Gomer Pyle of the group. Vasquez would kill you if you stood.
I think like what Vasquez represents though is kind of like, what Ripley could become almost in a way, where it's, Ripley's, tough. She saw that she was pretty tough at the end of Alien, but this is like the other, all the way over to the spectrum of, this is, a hardcore female, someone who's, lost, she's not exactly like motherly like Ripley, and, she's, one of the guys,
Well, you brought a good point, maybe too far over to the other side, that there has to be a balance in your life. The whole point of this is we gather everybody together so that we do two things. We start setting up these Marines at the whole dinner table bit, and they're all talking and whatnot, and we introduce Bishop. We got to talk about Bishop for a second. Lance Henriksen, who, has been in a lot of these kind of films in his life. He's kind of made a career out of this stuff. Is the new android in this. But he comes off as this kind of gentle, Bob Ross painter, school teacher kind of guy. And it totally freaks
Do the trick, Bishop.
Not only the bit with the knife, and he gets Hudson's hand, and everybody's seen that scene. But when he comes back, and Burke knows who he is, or who it is, I guess we should say, and he's kind of bleeding that milk stuff, and that's when Ripley just loses her mind.
Well, I think at this point, at least in human society, in this movie, is androids are commonplace. I mean, there's probably one in every classroom at this point, and Burke's looking over at Bishop when he's got like the milk coming out of his finger, and he's like, "Man, you never miss," and stuff, and they're all kind of laughing about it, and Ripley jumps out of her seat, but you can't blame her. I mean, look what happened to her in the last movie, and right away, Burke completely makes up a lie. He's just like, oh yeah, the other model that she was on, the Hyperdyne systems or whatever, malfunctioned, and it just got a little bit twitchy and stuff when, Ripley knows that's not the case, I
love how Bishop is programmed to be able to understand that. Like, oh yeah, those models did that. I couldn't hurt another person. It's totally against my programming and nature. And of course, we are automatically supposed to be on Ripley's side on this. It's like, no, don't trust the android. Matter of fact, cut his head off right now and set him on fire. Right?
Yeah, definitely. And even like Bishop's actions almost through 3/4 of this movie, you're looking at him going, he could be either which way. I mean, he could be Ash 2.0.
You don't know. But up until that point, he hasn't presented like Ash did. He comes off much gentler, even though he does the kind of cruel trick to Hudson. You almost feel like Hudson deserves that, So with the whole knife thing. So it's a neat dynamic, But you get that scene at the table, and then you also get the whole idea the lieutenant doesn't sit with the enlisted men, the grunts. And I love how these guys go, oh yeah, I guess he's too good to hang with us or whatever. And I want to tell you something. I know a lot of Army officers and a lot of enlisted men. That still goes on to this day. The only time they sit together is if they're at war together in the same place. The officers do not sit with the enlisted men. That's the sergeant's job. That's why you have ranks in the enlisted. But that's a dynamic, though, that there's a disconnect between the officers who are school trained versus the guys that actually know how to do the stuff on the ground. And I did like that they set that up, because you automatically build tension inside of a group that's supposed to be a unit.
Not even in just, military. I mean, you get that even at workplaces where it's like the managers sit next to each other and then the rest of us grunts sit next to each other.
Something we can all relate, but that's also, again, go back to the allegory of Vietnam. That was the thing, was that you had these educated officers who had no real ground experience, and you had all these troops that had maybe been in Korea or had been through other things that knew better but weren't being taken seriously. And it all leads to that big briefing. And I got to tell you, it would be a temptation to let Ripley tell her whole story. Today there would be flashbacks of it, as she's telling it. But I love how she gets interrupted in the middle of it. Excuse me, is this for real? They just totally cut her off. And I love how she never gets to tell what really happens. They have to, supposedly go read it all on disc. And I don't know, I liked that. I liked the fact that they were all just so cocky, like, yeah, we got it. Go sit down.
Yeah, even if you I know it really wasn't shown in the movie, but on the drop ship, you actually see their logo called, Bug Stompers, We Endanger Species. So it kind of goes back to my point about they've already encountered different types of aliens. So there they got this woman going on about some alien thing, and they're probably thinking, yeah, we've encountered, hundreds of different kinds, you're full of yourself, you're full of whatever this thing is. Okay, we'll handle it. We've dealt with it, we've dealt with worse, or at least that's what they think.
And the last thing that gets set up is Gorman moves them all into place. They start loading up the ships and all this stuff, the drop ships and all we see the APC, which is like this semi-tank car thing. Looks like something out of T1. But anyway, they're getting all that together, and Ripley, that's where she drops that she knows how to work the loader, which, immediately like, well, that's coming back later, because you can't show the gun in Act 1 and not have it go off in Act 3. So that's clearly what's going to happen. But I like that. I like that she asserts herself. It's like, well, can I do something? And they're like, well, I don't know. Can you do anything? And she's like, yeah, I can do that. And so she goes and gets the thing, and the two dudes are like, okay, sure. Apone and Hicks are like, yeah, sure, why not? Load that into there. So and you can tell
the
though, reaction's
great.
Yeah, and you can tell though that to the sergeant and the corporal, who in the enlisted, they would be the next guys in command below Gorman. They had, she has won them over by trying to be one of the guys, and to make herself useful. And I like that, though, because it allows that relationship to build that's going to really build throughout the rest of this film. Because when they get to that planet, man, all hell breaks loose.
And even just a little tidbit on this scene is you see Hicks and Apone talking together. So it kind of shows you that Hicks isn't, like Hudson or Vasquez or Drake, that he's a little bit higher up.
Yeah, well, he's got his stuff together. He and someday would probably be Apone.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, he's the corporal and stuff, and Apone's a sergeant, but even if you just disregard ranks and stuff like that, you can just kind of tell from this point that, yeah, Hicks is kind of like the third in command. There's Gorman, Apone, and then it looks like there's Hicks.
I like Michael Biehn. I've seen him in all kinds of stuff, and I like him even in some of the cheesiest stuff he's done. I just think he's a fun guy to watch. He's just one of those actors that he always pulls off roles where he has to be in command or something. He just seems like somebody that could command attention in whatever he does. And I thought he was great in Terminator. He's great in this. He's good in Abyss. He's good in just about everything I've seen him in. And I really buy him. I mean, I buy him as, yeah, he would work. And I love the whole dropship sequence, the whole express elevator to hell going down. I mean, how many times have I heard that, And it all came from this movie, and it's hilarious. And I will never forget, and I didn't say this at the start, Nick, I saw this in theaters when it came out. I went with my grandmother to see this. My grandmother, growing up, was into all the action horror films, and she would take me to go see them. And we went and saw this, and she just cackled at this scene. She thought it was hilarious. And I thought, if my granny can think this is cool, then I know it's cool. So I love this whole scene. And you're talking about Hicks, he's asleep the whole time. And I love that. I'm like, yes, because I can relate. If I'm in a car with somebody, I don't care what's going on. If I'm not involved in the conversation, forget it. I'm out.
Yep, so same here. It's like if I'm on an airplane and it's really turbulent, it's like, I'm going to sleep, guys.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I'm going to ask you the effects here, the whole dropship bit, where they drop looks like a Harrier jet almost off of the Sulaco into the orbit of LV-426. Do the effects hold up for you? I mean, you can see the lines and the wires, but I kind of like seeing an actual model, though.
It does. I mean, you can kind of tell as they get into the atmosphere, you can see the matte lines and everything, but what I like is that they actually built a lot of that ship. I mean, when they're showing the pilot in there and then they're kind of showing the camera go around the nose and to the side. I mean, they actually built that. I think that's so cool. You don't see that.
No, all that would be CGI now, but I like the fact that they would build the facades back then. I mean, it's all foam and, stuff like that, but it's painted up to look like metal, but it looks good. I mean,
It's a missing art form today, and it's great. I love seeing.
Well, it's just a different art today. Today, that art is as a visual graphic instead of being like an actual piece, But there's still some films that'll go for the pieces, and I like that this is one of those. Cameron, for all of his CGI love, and he is the master of a lot of that, he still uses a lot of physical stuff in his films, and always has. I like that about him. They arrive on the planet, and I gotta ask, the lieutenant is running all of this from like the hub. He's, they're on the big vehicle that drives up. The dropship takes off and is circling around, for air support, because it's not only their drop, but it's their air support. And so the ground troops move in, and Apone, along with Burke and Ripley and Bishop, are sitting in the ACP, and Gorman can see Gorman is sitting in the ACP with Ripley and Burke and Bishop, and he's watching off of everybody's like eye cameras, so he can see where everyone is. He's got their life signs up. He knows how much ammo they got. He's watching, and he's sort of directing the war like he was playing a big video game.
Yeah, the more I'm seeing Gorman too, the more I'm thinking, this is probably the college-educated corporate guy that got into the military, and they put him right up to, commander of this whole thing, because he just seems like I don't know, I just got the feeling, especially in the dropship, they're talking like, oh, how many drops has this been for you, Gorman? And he's like, 36, 34 simulated.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, the idea that he would be, but that's the knock on the officer of the Vietnam era, was that they were educated in the by the book, and he's a by the book guy. He's already said, I'm by the book, do it by the book, people.
I loved Hutchinson next to Vasquez, though. When he looks at her, he's like, great.
Yeah, no, I mean, you get that disconnect again from the enlisted guys, the actual ground troops, versus the officer that's running it all from the big camera setup. But I like that would give him the view, and that's how they're breaking in. And they basically kind of break into the complex. I mean, they go in, they wire the doors up, and they get inside, and they start looking around, and it's just stark. And having, again, you're watching the director's cut, you saw it populated 10 minutes before, and now you see it completely gone. There's that effect. But I'm almost akin to like the theatrical cut, Nick, where you walk in here, it's like, where the heck is everybody? And why is there like stuff left everywhere? So that doesn't mean people packed up and left. That means they got taken.
I got to point out too, is like in this point of the movie, I mean, we're well over, I think it's like 35 minutes into the film. I think, a lesser film, this would be 20 minutes into the film. You get like so much more just like the character stuff, the Marines talking to each other, so much stuff with Ripley, that it's, it takes a while to get to this point, but I just think the movie's so much richer for it.
Well, yeah, the slow build always pays off, and particularly Cameron films. Let's just look at James Cameron films. The ones that are really good are the ones that give time for everything to build and get you into it, and then once they hit the gas, it's on.
And everything we've seen up till now is going to have a payoff later in the movie.
And I like being rewarded as an audience member who will pay attention to this stuff. And you know what, though? If you're going to do that, you have to keep me engaged. So they keep introducing new things all the time. And it's the whole bit. And while I'm watching this, and I'm trying to think of it from a fresh perspective here, is what is happening here? What has Ripley got to be thinking about watching these guys walk around? And when she sees basically the carnage that's left behind, which there's nothing there, she's got to be having flashbacks to like, I know exactly what this looks like. I've seen this.
You can tell she's having flashbacks without them showing you that she's having flashbacks. I mean, they show she's looking in the cameras. I mean, she's in safety, but she's still feeling, I mean, you can tell that she's remembering what happened, and you can almost see like her hands over her heart. Yeah. Kind of like she's like bracing herself, like, almost like ready to have a panic attack in a way. And she's just, watching them. And then, you're cutting back and forth between that. And again, yeah, I mean, just thinking back to the LV-426 scene that we saw earlier, and it's just not needed when you see this stuff. I mean,
yeah, this is so much more effective to have gone this way, and that's why they were right to cut that, was because this puts you automatically on edge as an audience.
Well, you can tell something happened. You can tell something big happened here, but we just missed it. It's like
exactly, yeah. That line is, whatever happened here, we missed it. And then they walk into the lab and they see the specimens, and I got to tell you, that's a great jump scare when Burke, who winds up in the lab, walks up to one of the facehuggers that's in the liquid, and it just jumps on the glass at him, like it's still trying to get to him. And I'm like, wow, that was pretty good.
And even before that, though, I like it when they're in this thing for like 5 minutes, and there's Gorman going, "Yep, area secure," and Ripley literally takes off her headset and she throws it down. It's like this is not secure. this is not secure. And it's like, she's probably thinking, you bring me on here to be a freaking, advisor, and you're not even listening to me and stuff. But no, they head on in and stuff. And you can tell even when she's walking in, she's a little, she's shaken up already. And yeah, even when they got over to the facehugger scene, I mean, as much as like that, it's kind of startling when the thing kind of jumps at you. I mean, the first couple times I saw it, I did kind of jump up a little bit, but Hicks' reaction where he's like, oh, it looks like love at first sight to me, as he says to Burke as he's just staring at it.
But the important part is that you learn two things. One, they've been collecting the specimens, so that's automatically, okay, they've discovered the thing. And two, Bishop starts reading through medical records, and he's like, they killed this guy. They ripped his face off, taking it off. So everything, that the Nostromo crew thought would happen did happen. The thing would kill whatever it was attached to if you tried to take it off. And so, automatically you've set the bar back to reminding, or you've set that out there again to remind people these things are incredibly dangerous. You know what happened to these people. We know now, where is everyone? Where did they stash them? And that's what the next bit comes about. And then we get the blip of movement, and that's where in the theatrical cut we do introduce the character of Newt, the little girl, Carrie Henn.
Yeah, it's also a nice little introduction of the motion sensors, which are going to pay off big later in the movie when they're tracking what's going on. And also another thing that pays off too is when they kind of fire at Newt at first. I think kind of showing again, maybe the Marines aren't exactly the maybe the experienced badasses that they're trying to claim that they are. I mean, they just kind of blind fire at something running across, but Ripley sees that it's a little girl, and she's runs into the air vent, and Ripley takes off after her to rescue her. And I think it's just kind of a nice little payback later in the movie when we find out that Newt, she knows about these air vents, and that kind of ends up saving their life later.
Right. I mean, in the earlier scene that got cut, she's playing in them, so that's the whole bit, is that's how she would know that. But you can just accept that she would know it anyway, right?
I think she even brings it up later that she was played in that as a kid and stuff like that. So again, the stuff on LV-426 before was kind of just they are saying the same thing twice.
And I love how they Ripley's able to draw her out. Gorman keeps hammering on her and all this stuff, and even the other the other one of the other female soldiers can't really get her to talk, and Ripley starts washing her face off and just starts just talking to her, just talking like a normal person, and then all of a sudden she just starts talking.
Oh, she's talking to her like someone who's caring instead of someone trying to pry out information, and then when she doesn't say anything, total brain lock and walks away. It's like, yeah, insult her. Like, you're going to get some information out of her that way.
Exactly, yeah, because that's how you talk to an 8-year-old. So, it's to insult them, because they're so want to respond to that.
And Ripley knows at this point, too, that, this girl has probably seen what I've seen, if not worse. She's going to... needs a little, and she's 8 years old. I mean, come on.
Well, and she confirms that, because she's like, "Where's your parents? Where's your family?" And she's like, "They're dead. All right, can I go now?" Ripley's like, "Okay, I'm sorry." And then she's going, "Well, these people are here to protect you." And I love Newt's reaction. It's like, "Won't make any difference." Yeah,
because she's obviously she's seen something. And for any of the fans out there, you can actually get online free. It is actually a comic book that came out with this movie called Newt's Tale, which is it's kind of a neat little story. It's actually about what happened with her before the Marines got there. You can pretty much put the pieces together, what happened, from the deleted scenes as well as what she says. It's a neat little read. I won't get into it, but it's a neat little read for anybody out there who wants to check it out.
Yeah, this whole bit is that they're trying to find where the colonists went. And they've got Hudson on this, it looks like the mall map, trying to find everybody. He's looking for the colonist transmitters. They have transmitters in them, is that right?
Yeah, they have the transmitters like surgically implanted in them.
Okay, so because Burke drops that, you're right. Yeah, so that's what he's looking for, and he finds them all clustered together, and they're like, "What, the town meeting? What's going on?" And so they suit up and they're ready to roll in, and I'm like, "Okay, yes, great." And I got to tell you, I love this whole rescue mission bit. Everything that they're going through here when they start crawling into that atmospheric processor. It slowly goes from being the machinery that we would expect it to be to turning into that rib-caged alien like the derelict ship was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which another kind of interesting point though, and this is actually how where they find them is on a whole different side of the complex. It's not like they were in the next room next to them. They were actually in the atmospheric processor. And they actually have to take a little short drive over there to get there. So it just kind of adds a little bit more later in the movie and stuff is the why, stuff takes as long as it does. But yeah, I think it's, again, they all go over there, everybody, including Newt, except for the people in the dropship. You have 2 pilots that are waiting at the dropship go over to the atmospheric processor, and then the whole entire Marine group, except for obviously Ripley, Burke, Newt, and Gorman, head into the atmospheric processor.
So they finally discover some of the colonists, and they see some cocooned up. But we need to say something here. But as they get deeper into this thing, Ripley brings up a point that, hey, wait a minute, isn't this like a big reactor? So if you shoot guns in there, isn't that going to end badly? And Burke lays out the whole, this is going to start a chain reaction. So they have to collect everybody's magazine, basically. So they take all their bullets out. And I love I don't know the guy's name that does it, but the one line's like, what am I supposed to use? Harsh language? and they're like, no, just hit him in the head with your rifle. So I love how we send the Marines in to do the job, but then we're going to disarm them. And that is, and I'm telling you, and nobody will ever admit it, but I'm telling you, I'm reading right through this, that is the bureaucracy of the rules of engagement of sending soldiers to war and then not letting them open fire on people without asking 6 other people for permission. That was a big complaint in Vietnam. It's still a big complaint to our soldiers today. And I saw that and I'm like, yeah, I know exactly what they're talking about here.
Yep. But actually, to clarify a little bit though, but the weapons that they actually took were the more highly bullets that would penetrate. They let them still have like handguns, a shotgun, and the flame units, but yeah, they took basically their heavy weapons away, such as the pulse rifles and the smart guns, and those are. I mean, that's taken 90% of their firepower away.
You've basically given them good rocks to throw at things now at this point. So but I liked it though because now you've even the odds even more. So now they just can't go in and start wiping everything out because if they do, there's consequences to it, or is there? We'll get to that in a minute, I guess. Well, then they come upon some of the colonists and they see this one woman cocooned up. And I guess, is that what she's done, Nick? I mean, how would you describe how she's hanging on the wall?
Yeah, I mean, she's cocooned down there. I mean, yeah, I think it's kind of actually a little neat thing that they added to the alien lore is, we obviously know about the eggs and the face hugger, and it makes sense that, these things would collect the people or their hosts and basically cocoon them right in front of an egg. I mean, it makes sense. I just think this whole thing is just, it's adding so much tension, even for, you're not even seen an alien yet. And it's just like they're walking into it, and you as the audience, what's happening, and they kind of understand a little bit, and then also like, they take away their safety net of the weapons, and now they're going to throw them straight into it with the chest burster scene. And I mean, I guess when you want to learn how to swim, you throw your kid right in the pool. And how are you going to learn these guys how to deal with the thing? They send them in the worst possible thing you could witness right away, and that's a helpless person getting their insides ripped out by a chest burster.
Right, and then they flame the thing up, of course, and it squeals, and they kill it, which is really just creepy looking. Even now, watching this, it's so weird. But they do that, and then I love how they're all looking around, and they start catching all this movement, and they're like, well, what's moving? Well, it ain't us. Well, what is it? And then I love that one woman that turns the corner, and in the background, if you're staring at the wall, you can go, is that what I think it is? And then it uncurls, and it's one of the aliens. This is one of the best reveals in the whole thing.
Yep. I mean, even after they killed the first chest burster, you can see all suddenly they're all unnerved. They're all like, turning around, they're all freaking out, and then all of a sudden their motion detectors start going off, and they start freaking out, because it's like, okay, we just saw something we've never seen before, and we have no weapons, and Apone, what are we gonna do,
Right, and they're all radioing back to Gorman, and he doesn't know what to tell them to do, and they're all just kind of standing there, and then these things start coming out of the walls at them. Like we said, they're taking them up, and people are yelling and screaming, and that's when Vasquez reveals that, I just acted like I gave you my power supply. I had another one tucked over here, and she opens fire in the place you're not supposed to open fire in. Now, my question here is real quick. I thought opening fire in there would start an explosion.
I took it as something that's going to happen later in the movie, as it's going to start a chain reaction, not instantaneous, but basically, they're going to screw up some of the heating or cooling systems on there, and adios muchachos. Okay. And we'll get to that later about what I think, transpired from her breaking the firing quarantine law,
Well, and she's not the only one. Everybody starts loading up at that point and throwing stuff out. But the guy that was tasked to hold all of the ammo gets caught up by one of the aliens, and he's also holding a flamethrower and basically blows up all of the ammo and them and a couple of other Marines and a couple of aliens at the same time. So everything has just fallen apart. I mean, they've been completely demolished in this 3-minute scene. They go in there all big and bad, and man, they run out of there like a bunch of kids.
Yeah, they gotta try to make their way out, and Gorman's sitting there in the APC, just sitting there, mouth open, not knowing what to do. He has no idea what's going on. He has no idea what to do. He's not paying attention to Ripley. Burke, he's not doing any help, and finally Ripley just runs to the front of the APC and drives right into the nest full blast, and Gorman, trying to basically preserve himself, tries to attack Ripley, trying to get her to stop from driving it. And luckily, I guess, probably the only time we can say this in the movie, Burke kind of saves the day by ripping Gorman off of her. And yeah, she breaks into the nest and saves what's rest of the Marines, which happens to only be 3 of them at this point. There was 4, but Drake got killed right before he got to the APC.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing about that whole bit is, I mean, I love all the alien attack moments. They're coming out of everywhere, and you feel totally surrounded by this, right? And even in retaliation, remember what we talked about before? It's like, well, if the facehugger has acid for blood, does the alien have acid for blood? Well, in James Cameron's mind, that is an emphatic yes, because every time they shoot one of these things, that crap sprays on them, and it starts melting through the armor. That's what kills Drake. Right, he gets all over his face. He basically burns through his skull. I mean, how awful is that, right? So even when you're taking them out, they have a way to kill you.
And I thought it was actually kind of cool and eerie that as they're leaving, they're basically out of the nest almost, and there's still aliens at the front of the nest, so they were there the entire time, and it just makes you, I think it's just adding so much more to the mythology. I know some people complain about them, turning them into insects, but I like that they have almost like a hive mind, that it's like they're watching these people come in, and it's like, we're not going to attack them right away. We're going to let them get in there, because what's the point of attacking them before they get in the nest? Let them get in the nest.
That is one of the 3 big things I would say James Cameron adds to this series, and the other 2 I'll call out when we get to them in this film. But the idea that these are a hive mentality, like you say, these things work like instinctual insects.
Yeah, and it's like people like I said, people complain about that aspect, but I think that's great. I mean, what other organism is perfect as an insect? I mean, it's basically got one purpose, and that's the evolution or survival of its own species.
But and particularly when you think of like ants and bees. Those would be the ones that you think of.
It doesn't have personalities. They don't have, careers and jobs. It was like protect the queen and breed. Those are the only 2 things it needs to do, and that's the only thing the perfect organism would do. And I just think that taking it to the next step of it, comparing it to an insect.
That is a neat mentality, and I think you brought up something cool. They've been there the whole time. So what were they waiting on? Were they just hoping, well, maybe they'll just walk out of here and go away? That's another thing that they've kept from the Ridley, is that the alien is not in attack mode. The alien is a defensive, reactionary organism. It doesn't really necessarily think through this stuff. It's not plotting stuff out. It just does things when it gets in the right situation. And I like that they've held on to that still. Because the worst thing is when you start giving the killing thing in a horror movie too much motive. You know what I mean? Like when Jason gets hit in the face by someone, then he must go kill them. Then now we're getting a little bit much into it, right?
Yeah.
But the fact that these things still react to what's going on around them and to the stimulus around them is what I like. And what really brought them out, they killed the chest burster. Oh, I don't think so. You walk into my neighborhood and kill one of my kids? I don't think so. And that's exactly what happens in there. And the Marines get totally annihilated in one scene, basically, and they're down to limited weapons, limited numbers, and the ones that did survive are emotionally and physically scarred.
And yeah, I think even the escape scene's actually kind of cool, because you get a couple of really kind of neat alien deaths in here with, them trying to shut the door, and the alien, reaches in with his claws and is ripping open the door, and Hicks grabs the shotgun and shoves it in its mouth and blows its head off. And
it's a shot Cameron would use again, because if anybody that's seen Terminator 2 has seen Robert Patrick get his silver claws in the elevator and start to open it, and Arnold just levels the shotgun at him and blows his head in half, right?
Good call. I've never even realized that until now.
Yeah, I mean, every time I've seen Terminator 2, I'm like, I saw that. It was in Aliens. So, I mean, yeah, that's almost exactly the same shot.
Well, even in the deleted scene on here where they're talking like, takes 2 weeks to get an answer, and always the answer is don't ask. Well, they say the same thing in Terminator 2.
And I love it, the aftermath of all this. They finally get out, and they basically, Ripley's blown the car, she's blown the axle out of the car, and they're just driving across the nothing wasteland, and they're trying to slow down, and they try to regroup inside of the ACP. Gorman got a concussion because he got knocked out when something fell on top of him, so he's out of it. Hudson, Vasquez, and Hicks are all a mess right now and trying to keep calm, and there's Burke sitting over there, and then you got Newt and Ripley, and they're trying to figure out, what are we going to do? And I love the whole thing here where Ripley's like, yep, blow it up.
Now she's learned from her mistakes. I mean, she's a character that's evolving and stuff, and she realizes that this is the exact same situation. We're confronted with this thing. What's the best thing? And get the hell out of here and blow it up. That's the only way to take care of this. What else is there to do?
Because she has seen that work out before. We've tried to fight this, and it all just wound up being me, and we nuked it anyway, so let's just do it now. This is the only way to be sure.
But right after Ripley says that, of course, Burke bumps in and goes, none of us have the authority to, arbitrarily exterminate this species. And, they just kind of laugh at him like, screw you, man. Who are you to freaking say that?
Oh, that. When the Marines say that, and then, he's talking about how much money it costs, and Ripley's like, well, they can bill me. And I love that line, there, that in all that. And what ultimately comes down to it is that with Gorman out of commission and Apone dead, or allegedly dead, and all this other stuff, Hicks is the one in charge because this is a military operation. So Ripley says, well, Hicks, it's your call. And Hicks echoes what she says. Yep, we nuked the site from orbit. It's the only way to be sure.
Finally someone's listening to you.
Yeah, exactly. Which is why it's why you're supposed to like Hicks, is that you get that he would be the guy that would listen. And especially after just seeing all that carnage, oh, hell, I don't want to go back in there. Do you? He knows better. What are they going to do?
Well, and it's right after, too. Burke insults him. He calls him a grunt and stuff. And he's looking at him. It's like, nah, maybe a couple other action guys would knock him out or, strangle him or push him up against the door. He just kind of looks at him. He's like, I can get you where it hurts. Yeah, we're going to blow this whole thing up. Let's get out of here.
I never even took it as that. I think he, most of the grunts I know that are in the military, they kind of take that as a compliment. They're like, yeah, whatever. But he knows that, look, I know what I'm talking about, and you're just a suit, and in a suit and a really bad plaid shirt. So just sit down, and he's going to go with the experience because he knows Ripley knows what she's talking about. He's already established that this woman will do what she says, and everything she has said up to this point has been exactly right. In fact, it's 20 times worse. So screw this. We're out of here. And I like it. And they get back to Bishop, and they start talking about, what they're going to do. And they say, well, we gotta get help. So they radio for the drop ship to come get them. And you're like, okay, here comes the cavalry, right? And they load out the missiles and all this, but the dude running on the drop ship puts his hand down on the elevator, and what does he come up with? Goo. And you're like, well, they're dead. I mean, you just know it immediately.
There's KY jelly on the ship. We know it's there.
I mean, it's not, this isn't the Love Boat, so clearly this is a bad time to be having that around. And I love how the alien attacks the pilot, though, he figures out how to open the door on her, which I'm like, wow, now that's kind of neat. That's different. We've never seen that happen before.
Yeah, but then again, these things have been living in this complex for so long. Maybe they picked up a few things. I mean, as much as you say, I've been saying they're like insects. They're not dumb. These things aren't mindless creatures. I mean, they're adaptive creatures. Yeah,
they adapt to stimuli, and the stimuli is she's yelling at the guy on the radio to get up into the cockpit, and so the alien would be like, "Oh, that's where the other one is. Okay, I'll go over there. What opens this? Probably that red thing." And then, and that's it, and it crashes, and boom, there goes your ride home. Right, and not only that, it crashes into part of the processor, right? So inside of 12 minutes, we've had 2 major explosions near the thing that doesn't need to have major explosions near it. Nice world building, by the way. you know.
Building better worlds, but yeah, it's like right
but
away.
we can't build a wall around the atmospheric nuclear reactor. So, just saying. So,
Oh, they probably never thought there'd be drop ships crashing into
I'm
it.
sure it wasn't part of the plan. You're right.
You know, people running in there with pulse rifles and shooting at the core.
Nick, you were an engineer. Do you guys not think this stuff out? Alien problem? Come on.
Well, I bring it up in a lot of meetings, but they usually kick me out of those ones.
Well, anyway, the whole point is that much like what we've had to do with Ripley earlier, we have to strand this group, and that's when it's revealed that. And something Hicks knew that nobody else knew, that you assume Gorman probably knows, but he's knocked out. They're not going to be listed overdue for how long? 17 days. Wow. That's a lot. I mean, that's a long, consider how long it probably took them to get out there, that they're not going to be around in 17 days.
Yeah, yeah, they're screwed at this point. They're just like, what do you do at this? What do you do right now? I mean, you have no way of getting off the planet. You have, no rescue and hope. What do you do? And then you got Nuke going. They mostly come at night, so it's kind of yeah,
that creepy line.
It's getting dark again, and we we got to figure something out quick. So what do? They head back to operations. Pretty much the only quote unquote secure place on the planet.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, back where they had Bishop, and that's when he says, "Well, I can radio or remote fly the other dropship from the Sulaco down here, but it'll take me a while to get to the other end of the complex and get the antenna lined up." I mean, I like the fact that all that stuff takes time. It's like he can't just go, "Well, let me pull out my iPhone and go, okay." I mean, I like that there's technical wizardry to this. I mean, you can use all this great stuff, but it takes time to mobilize this stuff, and it makes sense that he would volunteer to go do that. He's like, well, I'm not alive anyways, right? And I have no delusions about being alive, so whatever. It's not going to attack me probably, so I'm just going to go and do the job. And I love how they keep up with that, but the only place they can be is in that little complex. But how secure is it, Nick? I mean, everybody that lived in there got taken out of there. Some people in mid-donut, for goodness sakes.
Yeah. It's the only thing they got, unless, they want to make this into a B movie, then they could go and go run over to the derelict ship and pilot that out of there. But
well, if this was directed by Brett Ratner, that would have already happened twice. But no, the derelict would have transformed into something else. That was Michael Bay's film. But anyway, we're getting ahead of ourselves. But I like all the setup here, though. The fact that they try to feel like they're secure, and the whole bit is that Ripley's trying to get Newt to lay down. She's like turns into mother all of a sudden, which is a different role for her. We saw glimpses of it earlier, but now we're really starting to see it.
Yeah, but even before that, though, when they finally get back into the compound and everything, they start discussing. I mean, that's the main thing, is how the hell are we going to keep ourselves secure? So they basically decide to just re-barricade the broken, areas that the aliens got through, and then they got some pretty badass sentry guns that they got off the dropship that crashed, and they set those at a couple of the entrances, and they're just gonna hope for the best. I mean,
right? They're gonna hope for the best and prepare for the worst, and that's also when they get into this whole discussion about where are all these eggs, and this is the first discussion of where this may be coming from, and we said in the plot summary it comes from the Alien Queen, and that's the second thing that James Cameron added to this Alien franchise that they will continue with forever through the rest of them. I don't know that it'll be in Prometheus, but it's in the rest of the ones we're reviewing, I know. And they're going to talk about that over and over again. This idea of the queen bee, the queen ant, whatever you want to call it. And I don't know. I mean, what do you think at that whole speculation bit? I mean, is that what you were thinking?
Before seeing this movie, I had no idea. I mean, it's always it was kind of one of those, did those space jockeys make them? What was it and stuff? And I know Ridley had that deleted scene, which I think was kind of stupid, but I think adding the whole queen element to it is just a really awesome aspect. I mean, besides the overall design of the queen, it makes sense. I mean, you're going to want this species, if they're the perfect organism, are going to want their reproductive process to be streamlined. And what a better way than just to have this queen pumping out thousands of eggs that are going to make thousands of little baby chest bursters.
Well, like we said before, it makes no sense to have two people to propagate your series or your species, right? That's not terribly efficient. This seems a lot more efficient. And again, I'm glad that did get cut out of that and was never shown, because had that been in there, this would have been one of those great retcons. How are we going to get around that? And it's just another piece of the alien life cycle. But the whole point is that you're setting the audience up for there's something else out there that we haven't seen yet. And I think that's even something Bishop says is something we hadn't seen yet. And so they're trying to figure out what to do while they're waiting on him to get everything ready to go and get the drop ship. And they're looking around and they do kind of a weapons check, and they don't really have a whole lot of any of that laying around. And they've got Vasquez and Hudson, who are not exactly the best of friends, are now on perimeter duty. I mean, you've got this ragtag group of people that are all just worn out trying to survive. And in the middle of that, you've got this little girl who has survived longer than any of them did.
Ripley's kind of trying to moralize everybody there by saying, this little girl survived, they're talking about 17 days. She survived longer than that on her own. There's no reason we can't do this. And, then after that, they go and they set up, their sentry guns and stuff, which will, lead to another, to a deleted scene that was added back in for the director's cut, which I think is kind of cool. But then, after, talking to the Marines and stuff and everything, she puts, Nuke to bed. And I think you have a sweet little exchange between them, and you can kind of tell that there's a little bit more to them than, just a little girl and a woman, is that Nuke's almost finding a surrogate mother in Ripley, and, Ripley's kind of finding a reason to fight. She's finding a reason to go on.
She's finding the surrogate daughter, the replacement daughter, the one she lost,
Yep.
And then she even comes up with that later, But now you talk about these sentry guns. Now that's something that's only in the director's cut. The scenes where they set those up and then where they go off too. But I'm with you. I kind of like them. I think it's neat that they had these things. And when they go off, man, I mean, they empty rounds fast.
Yep. I got a pretty nice surround sound system at my house, and when I was watching this and it was cranking, it's like, wow, man, those sound effects are freaking awesome in there.
Yeah, they are.
When they're pounding, I mean, Cameron, was kind of saving some money with this, obviously, because you can kind of see they're reusing some shots earlier in the film when the aliens are getting blown up by the Marines in the nest. They're kind of reusing those in this sentry gun scene, but it's still freaking awesome, man. I like just the little yellow LED or LCD screen that Hicks has got, and they're watching the countdown go down of the ammo, just you see it like 500, 400, 300, 200, 100. That's it.
Yeah, exactly. And like you say, it's one of those countdown things. It gives you that computer screen countdown and stuff, and that's all part of it. And then it's after that scene, which is cut, like I said, out of the theatrical, that you get the news that the station's going to blow. That is going to happen.
They never specifically state why the reactor is going to blow, and that's why I kind of said, even without the dropship crashing, I think what Vasquez and Drake did in there possibly caused that. And if not, then the dropship caused it, or maybe it was both of them. I don't know.
Yeah,
but,
I think it's a combination of all of the stuff. And I mean, think about it too. Something like that, like a power plant, again, I go back to, my dad working in power plants and stuff. You have to have people working that thing around the clock. And if it's been, a few days, couple weeks, whatever, since anybody's done any maintenance, I'm pretty sure the aliens hadn't figured out how to do that. So maybe it's failing on its own. I don't know.
Visions of going in there with the aliens with hard hats working in there.
I'm sure that is a robot chicken skit waiting to happen somewhere down the line. But no, really, I mean, that's the whole bit, is that that's the ticking time bomb for, if it wasn't enough to have the aliens coming after them, now they really got one. They got to get off this planet, fast. So Bishop, you got to go and get the ship like now, because we can't wait on this thing.
Yeah, and actually, that's when they decide. Bishop decides, I'll go do it. I'm the only one qualified to remote pilot the ship, and really, he's the only one that can safely go out there without, an alien coming after him. And actually, in a deleted scene, or not even a deleted scene, it was a scripted scene. It was never filmed. Was when he's in the big giant electrical conduit making his way outside. Actually, an alien actually is in there, who goes, face to face with Bishop, and it just looks at him and scampers off, showing that, these things, obviously can sense what's human or what's alive and what's not, and just, Bishop being no use to it.
And like we've said at this point, I mean, we talked about last time, are they using humans for food or not? Clearly, I think the answer to that, at least in the Cameron world, is that no, they're using them for cocoons. And so it would come on something like Bishop and be like, well, that's useless, so because it doesn't have anything to sustain life. His life support system is mechanized. It's not human, so it can't do any good. So I'm almost glad they didn't show that, though. That would have been a little weird, because it'd been like, then you would have wondered, is Bishop in cahoots with the aliens? I mean, that would have been kind of confusing. So did he just, Lance Henriksen and his weird stare, communicate with them? I don't know, but I love the whole plan, though, and how they get him down there. And again, I love movies that put me in claustrophobia. He's got to crawl through that conduit, and it's nothing, but he's just acting like, yep, no big deal, got it. And I would be freaking out, man.
Yeah, I'm claustrophobic as it is. I have trouble with closed spaces, and I would have got about 2 feet before I would have started kicking around and stuff, screaming to have someone get me out. But yeah, that's, but I like the way, like, throughout the, the next, 15, 20 minutes of the movie, they kind of keep on cutting back to him in there, and they're showing him, shouldering his way through.
Yeah, exactly. He's just crawling through. So then we get our second set of sentry guns going off, and this is another thing that got cut in the theatrical. But the whole point is that the aliens are figuring out how to waste all the ammo, it seems like, or they're drawing all the fire in the wrong direction. I don't know. I mean, how did you read all this stuff?
I read it as they were just running at it blindly, and the things were taking them out, and luckily that they decided to cease going that way because, they were just getting massacred in that hallway, and they just stopped going. They stopped going there, and luckily, they didn't realize that there was only 10 rounds left of the last sentry gun. Yeah,
but, the point is that these things, there's so many of them, they can take those kind of casualties.
Yeah, Hudson even says, he goes, they're wall to wall in there. I mean, those things were coming at him as a force, so.
Yeah, and that again is back to the allegory of the Vietnam War. We couldn't understand the idea of suicide bombers and people running at us in trench warfare and just the waves and waves of attack of people getting mowed down, and they just keep coming because the expendable force that just has no other reason but to fight you and just keeps coming at you and won't stop. Well, that can be really demoralizing to you no matter what kind of technology you've got, because you're like, I can't shoot all these people. I can't shoot all these aliens. I don't have enough weapons to do it. And literally here, they're running out of those are their biggest guns, and they're gone.
Luckily, it holds them off for the time being, and, they kind of go back to waiting now for Bishop to get over to the satellite dish and, link up with the dropship. And I think one of the scenes I really like, though, is right after that is Ripley gets trained by Hicks on how to use the pulse rifle.
Right.
And, they kind of go over everything, and, he's like, she's like, oh, what's this thing underneath? Because the pulse rifles have a grenade launcher, and, he's like, you don't need to know that. And she's like, come on, you started to show me the whole thing. And then right after that, she's walking with the gun, the gun on the shoulder or whatever, and out walks Gorman with the bandage on his head, and he's like ready to apologize to Ripley, and Ripley's like, save it, and she walks right by him.
Oh, yeah. I mean, she's in total protector mode at this point, and you know where she's going. She's going back to check on Newt. And she lays the gun on the bed, and she laid Newt on the bed, and Newt, of course, being survival girl, is under the bed, is on the floor. So that's where Ripley finds her, and she lays down there with her, and they're going to take a little nap. But that's interrupted pretty quickly by what may be the best scene in the movie.
Yeah, it's, if not the best, it's the most intense. I mean, even today, it's still watching it. You barely even see the face hugger, and it's still, you're tense watching it. And to set it up, Ripley and Newt wake up, and Ripley sees that the 2 containers holding the 2 live face huggers are spilt over on the floor, and she reaches up to grab her pulse rifle, and it's gone.
Right. And so
it's obviously a setup, and it's like, well, who did it? You could kind of figure out who's the only slime ball there with them. And when they kind of make their way over to the camera and, she's, waving her arms and they're going, Hicks, 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 pans back over to the operations room, and there's Burke watching her, and he turns off the camera.
Yeah, exactly. When nobody's looking, he just turns it off like, okay, and it's obvious he knows what, or it's obvious what his motive is trying to do. He's trying to get the alien back, right? But Ripley, being the resourceful person, figures out to grab her trusty cigarette lighter that we didn't know she had, and
she smokes. Come on.
Yeah, well, I know, but we hadn't seen her do it on the planet. But anyway, she grabs her lighter and she lights the fire extinguisher, and of course that sets off an alarm, and that sends Vasquez, Hicks, Gorman, and Hudson down there to investigate, and they see what's going down in there, and that's basically Ripley is got one of these things it's basically got its tail around her neck, and she's trying to fight it off. Newt's trying to get away from one that's crawling after her and is sort of pinned under some of the furniture in there, and they're trying to come up with ways to break the glass, and it takes them a minute to do it, but then of course they're able to charge in and they blow away the facehuggers. But it's a really intense scene.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And to kind of set it up a little bit more, we kind of glossed over it, but why Burke would do this is not once but twice Ripley kind of, was in his face about his intentions there. Excuse me. But the first time being, when they get back to the colony, after the whole fiasco happened in the nest, she's going through the colonist transcripts and she finds out that Burke was the one who indeed sent the colonists out to the derelict spaceship. It wasn't Wayland Yutani that did it. It wasn't, Van Leeuwen. He didn't send him out there. It was Burke.
So that answers the question earlier that they didn't know anything. Burke heard about it from her in that debrief, and then he's the one that came up with this whole bit.
I still think they knew about it. I don't think they were ready to go after it, but I think that Burke did this all on his own and sent the colonists out to go get it. And Ripley tells him, she goes, they're going to find out about this. And he's like, well, who's going to tell them about this? And she's like, I'm going to tell them about this and stuff. And right away you're like, you could tell he's probably like, that freaking bitch. She's mad.
Well, the thing is, and these two scenes with Paul Reiser, the one before this and then the one after, where they're confronting him about what he's done or allegedly done to her and Newt. I think Paul Reiser is known to be a comedic actor. He was on Mad About You, as his TV show, and I think everything else he's ever done is pretty. He's light, and I've seen his stand up. He's kind of funny, but he does some real dramatic stuff here, particularly that first scene where he's trying to explain his point to her. And I'm going to tell you something, Nick. He's pretty darn convincing. He comes off like a good salesperson.
Oh, he's so sleazy. He's just one of those guys where it's like, he's made he's screwed up, whether or not he wants to admit it, and he's just trying to talk his way out of it.
Well, but even not beyond being sleazy, though, his logic, from his point of view, makes total sense, and I think that's what makes him not be so one-dimensional. Like, it's easy to play that as sleazy because the guy is sleazy.
Yeah, he's the ultimate capitalist. He's seen this whole thing as a money venture. It's like, there's no exclusive rights for anybody if I would go and notify the company, because they would send these people there and they're there, and I would make no money on this stuff. That's stupid. Come on.
And talk about Cameron Echoes in Titanic. There's a character in there that wants to run the ship at its highest level, right? And even in Avatar, there's a guy that's trying to get the unobtainium, right? This is a repeated thing for him over and over. And so seeing this time, I'm going, oh yeah, and it reminded me again of things I would see in the future. But I got to tell you, Paul Reiser plays this so well. He really sells it for me, and I can't give the guy enough praise for it. And I'm not gonna. He's not the most perfect actor ever, but this is a fantastic scene, and I've always kind of wondered why he didn't get a little bit more dramatic roles, because this to me was really convincing.
And even there was another scene that we didn't really talk about, but that was when Ripley walks in on Bishop, and he's looking at the facehuggers, the dead facehuggers, much in the way Ash was looking at it, and she's questioning him. She's like, you're going to discard that, right? And he's like, no, they're going to be saved and brought back, to the bioweapons division. And she's like, what? And then she goes and confronts Burke about it, saying, you're not taking those back. And right away he's like, oh, those things are worth multi-million dollars to the bioweapons division. And, if you were smart, she's like insulting her. He's like, if you were smart, you would think like this too. And again, he's going back on exactly what he said in the beginning of the movie, where he's like, we're going to go out there to destroy him. We're not going to bring him back. We're not going to bring him back to study. And you can, right, he shows his hands so early, but it's just like, it goes from showing his hands to now it's, he just shows that he's just a vindictive, evil man. He's going to basically murder a little girl just to make himself some money. I mean,
exactly. I mean, that's his whole point. And that's what she starts talking about afterward, is that there's no way he could get one of these things back through quarantine. So he would have to get us impregnated, if you will, and then, take care of the other, you guys' capsules, and then he can make up whatever story he liked on the way back. And then when they got there and they were hatched, well, then they would have what they wanted anyway. And that's she's figured him out. But I love how, again, in the middle of the exposition scene, it gets interrupted because, oh yeah, there's these thousands of aliens coming. And we don't know why they're coming in. We just know they're coming in. Maybe they finally figured a way around the sentry guns, whatever. But all the lights go out. And I love Hudson's reaction here. It's like, how did they cut off the lights? How can they do that?
Yeah, they're animals. But up until that point, you almost kind of forgot about the threat outside. You're thinking, freaking Burke, grease him, man. Freaking, when that, Hicks, breaks his neck or shoots him or whatever, then all of a sudden the lights go out and you're like, oh yeah, there is a bigger threat.
Right. It's we know who the good guys are, who the bad guys are, and then there's the outside threat. And there's all those three sides converging here in the middle of this. And basically, they get overrun by these aliens. Like, they're sitting there watching the countdown. Again, that's tension building. Ridley Scott was able to do that in his film because it was an enclosed space and it was haunted house, right? Well, it's done here because we know that they're being attacked. They're under attack in some form or another. And they can't, there's nothing in front of them. It's not below them. Where is it? And finally, it's Hicks who looks up through the ceiling and you see those aliens crawling at him. And I got to tell you, man, that's still to this day one of those things that just gets me. I'm like, oh, that's so cool. It's just so alarming. And of course, man, then they just start unloading the guns. Everybody unloading the guns.
Did you get that they just overlooked the ceiling? That, they barricaded everything, but they didn't barricade above the barricades, and they didn't realize that there was a drop ceiling in this complex?
Yeah, that is a little bit of a plot hole, but go with it like this. They don't. No, I
don't think it's a
they don't really have an understanding of the whole complex. They're going by what they know how to do, and they would have never thought about cover the air ducts.
No, I don't think it's a plot hole at all. I think that's just an honest oversight that they were like, holy crap, we didn't realize this place had a drop ceiling. I mean, that's something that, you're covering everything from, B to Z, and then you forget about A. It's like, oh man, we forgot about that. We forgot to lock the doors before we left for vacation. I mean, that's just what it is. It's just this, you remembered everything except for the one thing the most important thing, and that's how I always saw it. And it was like, that's the reaction I get from like Hudson when they're like, they look up in the ceiling and they're like, oh my God, they're like, almost like kicking themselves. They're like, they're up there.
But they don't have much time to feel bad about it because, like I said, these things are coming out on them, man. And everybody starts fleeing except Hudson, who goes down swinging. Got to tell you, when I saw this as a kid, and even when I see it now, I know it's coming. I'm like, man, I don't want Hudson to go because he's talking so much trash and he's laying out so much firepower, and they come and get him basically out of the floor. And it's like, the fun guy. We didn't want the fun guy to buy it, but of course he does. Of course he's had the best lines of the movie the whole way anyway, for the most part. So him going down swinging, that I kind of like it though, because you think Hudson is this big talker and he's kind of a wuss, but actually no. When it comes down to it, he can fight, and he goes down. With the ship. I mean, he goes down fighting.
Yeah, he started, in my opinion, he kind of started swinging a little wildly and stuff, and he forgot about what was going on around him and stuff, and that's how to be able to get him on the floor. But the thing I want to point out is, can you believe there's only 4 aliens at a time in this scene? Because there was only 4 suits made for the aliens, and I mean, just the direction and the way it's cut, the way that, they're always showing them coming through the ceiling and coming through the floor. You never get a sense that there's only 4 in there. I mean, you feel like there's at least 24 of them in there.
I want to bring this up now too, because it's a good time to introduce this. Part of that is cutting and direction, you're right, and design. The other part is the score. And James Horner is an amazing composer, and he and Cameron didn't work together for a long time after this. It wasn't until Titanic that they got back together, because they had a lot of fights over this. But I want to tell you, his score here is amazing, and the way, I mean, it sounds like it's pumping and just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. It adds so much to all these scenes, and really to these attack scenes in particular. I always equate the feeling like there's more aliens coming with the fact that that orchestra is just banging in the background and it's just coming at you. And I watched this film, on television, and I also watched it on a computer with my headphones on. And I mean, I'm going to tell you, both settings, I mean, that score just works. And I think that's half of it, at least, is you feel like the aliens are so imposing because the score's imposing.
And this score has been used a lot. I mean,
every trailer until Inception horns were existed, this is what you had. So,
and also, little fact with that too is he only had a matter of days to write this score.
Amazing, right?
When you watch the production of this on the DVD, they talk about the score and basically how he had no time at all to write this stuff, and he somehow did it. I mean, I think he did it in a matter of a week. He wrote all the music to this movie. That's
amazing. I mean, again, out of great adversity sometimes comes amazing art.
Which you can probably see why he was kind of mad at Cameron. He was like, he busted his butt really bad to get it done, and he probably walked away going, I ain't ever working with that guy again,
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, they walked away from each other for a long time before they got back together, but it's part of what makes this all so imposing. Now, I got to tell you, my favorite, deaths, though, of any of the Marines are Vasquez and Gorman. I love the fact that they're both running down the air shafts and going or everybody's running, and Vasquez gets hurt because she starts shooting these aliens in the ass. He gets all over her, and Gorman goes back for her like a good lieutenant's supposed to do. And he gets in there and he uses up all his rounds, and the last thing he's got is a grenade, and he's like, okay, and he flips the lid off of it, and they all grasp hands around it, and she's like, yeah, okay. I mean, I know she calls him an asshole at the end, but that's you can tell that's a moment of respect that she finally shows this guy. And I love that. I love that moment. It's just a little moment, but I love the way that's done.
And I want to point out too, what's kind of great about that tunnel scene when they're in the air shafts is the alien, it's just the way that Cameron shot it. It looks like it's almost spinning as it's crawling. It's not crawling like a person is. I mean, the way that, it's got those tubes on his backs and the arms, you can't tell what's his arms and what's the tube, but you can tell the thing's rotating as it's crawling through. It's a real cool effect.
Oh, it's amazing. It's a great camera work. Again, it makes you realize that these things are coming at you from every direction. They're impossible.
And that's actually why Cameron, when he actually, casted this movie, when he had people, he casted people who were in gymnastics and, to play the aliens. It wasn't just, for their looks, because, he understood that mostly that these people would be in the shadows, but he casted for what they could actually do in the suits, which I think pays off, especially when you look at what happened in the nest and stuff, the way they were able to jump from wall to wall. That wasn't anything more than, just a little simple wire work.
Yeah, but it looks amazing when you've got the right people involved in it.
Yeah,
that's the difference in these aliens versus the one in the last that moved kind of slow and deliberate. These are much faster, and maybe it lets you know that there may be inside of this species there may be different versions. Maybe there's workers, and maybe there's fighters, and maybe there's something laying all the eggs that we're going to get to in a minute. There's all this stuff that you can start to think about. But in the middle of all of this, as they're getting away, Nuke falls down like this little rotating air shaft thing, and Ripley and Hicks are trying to cut through metal to get to her, because they have to unweld stuff. And popping up behind her in one of those iconic moments again from this movie is one of the full-suited aliens. And by the time Ripley and Hicks get to her, all that's left is her little doll head. And so they know she's been taken away. And that's when Ripley makes her final transformation. And this is the last thing that James Cameron added to the series. It's what he did with the character of Ripley, extending what happens for her at the end of Alien into this and turning her into what I call the prototype for what Sarah Connor is in T2. This determined fighter, not going to quit, going to keep her promise woman, And she's, from that moment, in one moment she's sad, and the next she's determined that, let's go, let's get to the ship because I'm loading up and I'm going back to get the girl.
And you can actually, even from the beginning of the movie, it's a complete transformation, because if you remember when Ape Hone and all them in the beginning or in the middle of the movie were taken by the aliens, because they weren't killed, because there was Hudson and Hicks were like, their signals are low, but they're still alive. And right away, Ripley's like, you can't help them. They're being cocooned. You can't help them. She's telling them, you can't go back in there and get them. What are you going to do? But when it was Newt, she changed her mind. I mean, yeah, it's a little girl and stuff like that, but I think just basically it was her character changing, saying, you know what? I got to go in there and do this, because if I don't, this is going to haunt me for the rest of my life. I just can't up and leave. I got to go. I'm going down, swinging,
And again, like you've asked several times, what else has she got to lose? At this point, this is everything she's.
Oh, it's her
got
daughter.
left.
This is her surrogate daughter at this point.
Yeah.
And, as a parent would do, it's like, my life is nothing compared to this kid's, and if I'll do whatever I need to do, and if I die, you know what? So what?
I love the scene where she starts arming up. She's putting the guns together and she's locking and loading. And every action movie's got this montage of people just needlessly loading ammunition into weapons and things like that. But I got to tell you, at this point, I'm digging it. I'm loving it. I love that she goes in there and you get the little counter on how many bullets she's got, and she's got a little bit of flamethrower, and that's not infinite. She's only got a little bit, but she's going in packing. And the whole arm up scene is just amazing.
No, she needs a boomstick from Evil Dead.
I mean, really, at this point, that's about all she's got. And I love how she starts putting this stuff together.
Yeah, she grabs out the electrical tape and tapes it together.
Yeah.
And of course, I mean, it's a little plot device, but, Hicks got injured before this, and he's unable to help her. But actually, I want to point out is in the original script by Cameron, Hicks actually does go down into the nest with her.
I kind of like it that he does, and I like that it's her going alone. That makes a lot more sense. But now in the director's cut, we do get a little breath here, because they stop and they exchange first names with each other, because everybody's gone by last names this whole movie, right? Mm-hmm. And Hicks turns around and tells her, my name's Dwayne, and she says, well, my name's Ellen, and that's the first time we get that she had a name besides Ripley, because that's all we've known her as, right? And just that little moment, I kind of like that. I almost wish that was back in the theatrical cut. It would have been a nice moment.
Yeah, there's these little scenes like that I think would have really, helped, just kind of, I don't know if it would help the movie, but it just, like you said in the beginning, at the end of the movie, it kind of helps it breathe a little bit, because at this point, we've been going about 20 minutes nonstop, from the face hugger scene to them attacking, probably even longer than 20 minutes. And, she's going to go right back in the nest. It kind of gives the audience a little bit of time to lower their pulse again.
Yeah, I know. And I love it. And then we get Ripley going through the nest. I mean, this is amazing. All the set work here where she's going down into the levels of the processor and she gets into the nest and everything. I mean, this is just, it looks like it's endless, and you're just going, oh my gosh, how many of these things can there be?
The part I really like, though, is when she's in the elevator and she's, like, readying herself. I mean, she's, taking off the jacket and putting on the, I don't know what you would call that, the strap with the grenades on it, and, making sure the gun's all locked and loaded. And, she pushes back her hair a little bit. And then the part I like is how she just closes her eyes and just breathes and just is like readying herself. She's readying herself for the storm.
It's like she's saying a little silent prayer before she goes into battle there. That's, yeah, I mean, I like the whole bit too. I mean, it is just that last hero's moment before they have to go off into the abyss.
And the part that I don't think we actually mentioned was earlier in the movie, Hicks, when he was talking with Ripley, gave her like a little, it looks like a watch. And then it has a little tracker that he was holding on to that would show him in meters how far away the watch was. But Ripley later gave it to Newt as kind of like a little, I'll find you with this, kind of foreshadowing what was going to happen. And that's what she's using to track down Newt. And as she goes through the complex, she finds the watch laying on the ground and she just starts breaking down. Just like, she has no idea where to go now. And it's like, mind you, the nuclear detonation now isn't in hours. We're talking like 20 minutes. So it's kind of like,
you're hearing the voice of Mother or whatever, doing that countdown again. And so she doesn't have a lot of time. Bishop's already told her, look, you're going to have to get back quickly because I can't wait forever. And she just keeps on going, and sure enough, she does find Newt.
Well, she finds Newt, luckily, because a facehugger hatches and Newt's awake and she screams when she hears it, and Ripley comes rushing over and blows away the facehugger and blows away a couple aliens and rescues Newt. And as she's making her way out, she kind of backs her way into a different part of the nest that the Marines were never in. And as she's looking over, she sees I don't even know what you would call that. Almost looks like an elephant trunk, the way it's kind of slurping it down. And yeah, it's the queen alien, and it's laying some eggs. And
well, beyond that, you got the queen kind of sitting in this, I don't know what she's in. It's like this helmet or rest that she's in, and she comes out of it, the queen does, and it's this, I mean, the biggest, most massive alien you could possibly dream up. And to hear Cameron tell it, you know, him and Stan Winston drew the thing up on napkins, drinking cocktails on an airplane or something, but they just kept thinking about the biggest, baddest alien of all time. And if this is what we were thinking about, this is what's laying the eggs, it would have to be the biggest thing we've ever seen. And I got to tell you, man, it's still impressive to this day. It's amazing model work, and it's just a great concept above everything else that you're going to have these two queens, if you will, face off in the end of this thing.
I mean, maybe I'm being a little overzealous here, but I almost compare this like the T-Rex in Jurassic Park, just as far as how it looks. I mean, this thing looks alive. I mean, just the work that it does, and just how the head extends out from another head to almost like another head, the way it comes out, and just the way it's breathing. I mean, you can see like almost like the nostrils, the way that the air's coming out of it. It's a real big nose breather, the way it's breathing. But it's just great, and it's not dumb either. I mean, this isn't just a mindless, dumb animal. It's looking at Ripley and wondering what the hell's going on. And then she sees that Ripley isn't exactly a defenseless animal herself, that she's packing some heat with the flamethrower, and she demonstrates that. And then what does she do? She aims it right at the egg, showing the queen that, you know what, don't screw around with me or I'll take these out. And the queen understands. And I just think it's just an awesome scene. I think that, you know, it's just showing the intellect of these things. And the queen looks over at the other aliens that are around the nest, you know, that are kind of starting to come in, that they're going to take out Ripley. And she's looking at them, and she's kind of like giving a little head nod to, you know, get the hell out of here. You know, she's going to just let them be. But one of the eggs opens up, and Ripley gives that little head nod herself and opens fire and lets out all the rages she's built up for these 2 movies on the nest.
Yeah, 57 years of anger and pain come wailing out of that flamethrower and that pulse rifle, man. She empties 100 rounds down the range and lights it all up. And, I mean, basically destroys it to the point that the queen can't stand it and detaches herself from her egg sac and, you know, we assume gets away with it, right? You know, I love it though, man, because it's Ripley just taking charge, and then her and Nuke get the heck out of there because, you know, hey, the clock is still ticking on the atmospheric processor to blow, and she figures, well, I've done enough damage here now. This queen ain't going nowhere, and she bails. And I love that whole scene though. It's one of the great action scenes, and it's funny if you know all the extended stuff. You know, Sigourney Weaver is one of these people that hates guns, no guns, anti-guns or whatever, but she looks awesome holding that thing and just unloading it. I mean, it's great.
She said during the making of it too, like, you know, she hates guns, but when she's firing it, she's like, I can see why people like firing these, because she's like, it's empowering almost in a way. And, you know, it's, yeah, I mean, you can tell. I mean, she doesn't like guns, but just the way that, you know, the way she acted with it, I mean, it was spectacular. I mean, when she's letting go on that nest and shooting everything and blowing everything away and pumping the grenade launcher, I mean, just the look on her face, I mean, you can tell what she's doing. Yeah. She's just releasing all that anger and just taking it out on them, and it's justified. I mean, without saying it, it's completely justified.
And then to add even more tension, her and Nuke get back to the platform, and Bishop's nowhere to be found. And she's like, duh, you know, and so she thinks, well, we're going to die here when this thing blows. And then the elevator, which has gone back to where it came from, comes back up, and who's on it but the queen? And it's like, oh no, now it just got worse.
And for the nitpickers out there, it wasn't that the alien queen actually operated the elevator. If you actually watch the scene closely with Ripley and Newt when they get in the elevator, they didn't hit any buttons either. It automatically went back up to the top level. It's just probably an automatic setting on the elevators. Queen went up to the top. So no, the queen didn't operate it. She didn't sit there with her finger and hit top floor.
At this point in the movie, I don't even care. I'm going with it. I'm like, oh, that just made the exploding power plant is not enough. My ride has left is not enough. Now I got this thing to deal with too. But of course, Bishop shows up and is able to get them on the drop ship. They get away, and you assume they're getting away, right? Because he's flying away, and I mean, again, that music is da 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 da, all behind them, and they just get out of the atmosphere when the processor detonates. And I mean, talk about nuke the site from orbit. That was an impressive planetary explosion.
Yep, you can see the mushroom cloud and everything. It's a very cool effect. But actually, even before that, though, the part that you gotta, that you want to pay attention to is when one of the explosions happened inside there. The shockwave kind of knocks the dropship back towards the platform, and some of the landing gear gets caught in some of the debris on the ground. So it's always something just to kind of point out a little bit to what happens in a little bit. But yeah, it's a cool scene, and yeah, they, Hollywood, typical movie, they barely get out of there, but it's still cool. It's very
But
cool.
just like the first Alien, we've got to have the fourth act. We get back to the Sulaco, and Bishop's going, hey, I'm sorry, that platform was unstable. I had to get off of it. Didn't mean to scare you. And, Ripley's like, no, it's cool. We're good. And then out of freaking nowhere, he just convulses and starts to churn, and you're like, there's no way Bishop has a face hugger in him. Nope, it's just the alien queen's tail going straight through him, because like you pointed out, Nick, the alien took that opportunity to climb up in the freaking landing gear. And I'm going to tell you, it's an amazing looking effect when he starts just writhing and spewing that milk out everywhere. And when she picks him up, the queen, and just rips him into two pieces and tosses him. I was like, now it is on. And, Hicks is useless because he's drugged on, pain medication. So it's her and Newt versus the queen again.
And, the point out things that, let me do that over again. To point out what we've been bringing up, the alien is the ultimate survivor. It's the ultimate adapter, and, the thing jumped on top the landing gear. I mean, maybe a little bit far-fetched that something that big got on that ship, but it's just too cool. You gotta forgive it. You gotta look past it. I mean,
if you're going with the ride here, though, this is a great setup and a great shock moment, because you want that big face-off. You've already had the semi-face-off, but you really want Ripley to get a hold of the queen. So how do you make that happen, Nick? I mean, how do you manufacture a way where Ripley can actually do combat with the queen? You go back to the first act and remember the thing Ripley got a hold of before when she made herself useful, the loader. She goes after the loader, and I'm going to tell you, I thought for years that thing was real. I don't know why we don't have those now.
But yeah, I mean, it's very cool. It evens the score, and it brings us to the climax, which is mother versus mother.
Yeah.
I mean, basically, the Ripley just took away the queen's babies, and for all intents and purposes, that species took away Ripley's first daughter, her first family, her first life. So it's kind of like you got the ultimate grudge match in the universe.
Yeah, and I mean, they go at each other for several minutes. I mean, it's a good 3 or 4 minute fight here. And I got to tell you, great work here. Great model work, great set work, and again, the way it's all cut together, and the aliens' teeth are getting close, and that Ripley's getting shots in, and they're going back and forth. I love this fight. It's amazing. And I just think it looks great. But I got to tell you, Nick, we've now hit a bump in the road. I think I've praised this as much as I possibly can. We finally get to something that I see Ripley key in something, and it opens up a door in the floor, and I'm like, they're going for the airlock. And sure enough, they both get in this fight, and she's trying to drive the queen toward the airlock, and they both get drugged down in there. And then, Ripley's got to get out and open up the door to space. Now, this I got questions about. How can you open up a door to the vacuum of space and not be sucked out into it yourself?
Got a really strong elbow. I don't know.
I feel like I'm at the end of the first Alien again, where there's really no answer to this, and it's just a question that will linger with me forever. But is this satisfying how it ends? Because she opens the airlock, and basically the alien queen gets sucked out into space, and through sheer force of will, Ripley climbs up through the hole in the floor and shuts the door again.
Yeah, I don't really know much about the way that it would actually work. I mean, I'm sure someone out there does and everything, but it is a little bit far-fetched. But like you were saying with the last movie, it's kind of like the barrel in the shark's mouth. It's kind of like everything so far has been, relatively grounded that you got to go with.
Well, yeah.
Really, at this point, what other way is there to get rid of this alien? You can't just blow it up with all the acid for blood. With an alien that big, it'd burn through the floor.
Oh, yeah, the whole ship would be toast. You're right. Yeah, she can't blow it up. She can't burn it or anything. So the only solution is to throw it out into space. It's just, I don't know. Again, I'm picking at something, and I'm admitting that I'm picking at it. When I'm watching this movie, Nick, and I'm just watching it to watch it, I don't think about any of that. I don't care. You know, I'm going with it, and I want Ripley to climb up those ladders and get out, and I want her Nike to go flying off into space with the alien's hand.
I mean, I guess the way they could have rewrote it is maybe that she fell down in there with it, and she climbed up the ladder, and then the alien queen was, you know, getting out and almost out by the time, and, you know, Ripley barely shut that top one before the alien was able to get out, and then opened up the bottom, airlock and shot it out. But he kind of adds a little bit more drama with, you know, the whole ship, you know, basically being sucked in, and oh my God, what's going to happen to Newt? And then, you know, Bishop saves her, you know, with his kung fu grip and everything. You know?
Yeah, I did like that. The top half of Bishop is still aware enough to be able to grab Newt if she's sliding by on the floor, and he's holding on to her while he's holding the grate.
And according to Alien 3, I guess his lower half survived.
Well,
too.
we're gonna come back to that. We'll get that next time. But you know, that is it. That is the actual ending. Everybody, you know, the three of them are back up there on the top, and then we get back to the Sulaco into the hypersleep chambers, and we see Bishop is all in his, like he's been bagged together and I guess shut down for the trip, and Hicks is all bandaged up and laying in his, and then Ripley and Newt are freshly washed and ready to lay down, and time to dream.
Why the hell would you want to dream after that?
I think maybe the whole point is that, and if you want to believe that this was supposed to be, you know, the wrap, and James Cameron certainly looked at it as, well, I'm going to wrap this story up for Ripley here, is that she's come full circle now. She's back to, she's not the same person as she was, but she's regained what she felt like she had lost. She has a purpose in life. She has someone to care about that also cares about her, and she's made peace with the alien. And hey, for all we know, Nick, all of the aliens are now either dead or floating out in space. You know, because she blew that planet to bits, and the one she blew out of the airlock on Nostromo, and then the Queen, are now floating through the cosmos somewhere. So there's a reason to feel like there's some peace to it, and I like it. It's that, you know, Cameron does this a lot at the end of movies, this peaceful moment after these huge storms that he's orchestrated in front of us.
Yeah, and I mean, the whole movie, they're setting up a family dynamic between Hicks, Ripley, and Newt. I mean, you see it after the facehugger scene where, you know, Ripley's holding on to Newt and Hicks is kind of over both of them. I mean, they were hinting at that the whole time, that this was kind of a surrogate family that came together underneath, you know, the ultimate distress. I mean, and, you know, yeah, I think it's, for me personally, I think it's just should have been the ending of the series. I mean, it ends on a perfect note. I mean, finally an upbeat ending. I mean, even at the end of the first Alien movie, it's a happy ending, but it's really not. I mean, she lost everything, and I hope I get picked up. And this one, it's like, you know what? She faced her demons. She's kind of regained some of what she lost, and, you know, it is, you know, ready to move on, I guess, in life. Or I guess if you could move on, I don't know if you really could after all that, but, you know, she, like you said, she regained some of what she lost. So
you move on, changed, but wiser, and now you're in a better place. I think that's the whole point. So, well, Nick, I think we're at the point of the podcast where it's time to give final thoughts, recommendations, and popcorn rating. And I don't think it'll be much of a surprise, but what are yours for Aliens?
My final thoughts are just another great movie. I mean, so far we are 2 for 2 with this series, and Aliens is just as a strong movie, if not even stronger than Alien. I mean, some people say this sequel outdoes the original. I couldn't, you know, disagree with that. I think both movies are spectacular. Both movies are, you know, different sides of the same coin in a way, and it's a great movie. Again, it's one of my top 5 movies. Yes, my top 5 movies include 2 movies from the same series. I mean, not many people can say that, and I just got to give it an extra large popcorn. It's Great time, great movie. If you haven't seen it, what's wrong with you? Go see it right away.
Hey, Nick, I'm with you. It is a fantastic ride. It's different. It's, I would say as a kid, I probably saw this one more, and I maybe liked this one more because of the action elements. The older I've gotten, I really appreciate the first one for what it is, and I do think it's better than this, but that's not to slight this in any way. I think this movie's fantastic. It's a lot of fun, and if you just go with it, you can really enjoy it. You don't even have to be a fan of this of horror or sci-fi or any of that stuff to like it. It's a good character story too, and it's well done. It's beautiful. It looks amazing, and it holds up to this day. And I think we've praised it a lot, and for good reason. I think this is a movie that's worthy of a lot of that, and we certainly nitpicked a lot of stuff in it too. But I think it's a wonderful continuance of a series, and so I'm with you. I'll join you in that bucket of extra large popcorn, man. It's a great film, and we're 2 for 2. Well, Nick, as we know, though, this is not the end of the series. We got a lot more to go, and we'll be back next time with Alien.
For Alien 3, we were discussing how we were going to exactly approach this movie, because there is 2 versions of the movie. There is the theatrical version and the assembly cut, and unlike, Alien and Aliens, where you had the director's cut and they added stuff into it, in my opinion and Jay's opinion, that Alien 3, the theatrical cut and assembly cut, are almost like 2 different movies. The assembly cut has over a half hour of additional stuff into it, adds different subplots into it, so we've decided to tackle it in 2 separate episodes. The first episode just talking about the theatrical cut, and then the second episode concentrating on the assembly cut and all the drama that happened before and after the movies.
Yeah, so next time we're going to talk about the theatrical cut of Alien 3, and we'll do that just like a straightforward review like we have done, and then for the next entry we'll do Alien 3.1, if you will, the assembly cut, which is put together by the editor and adds in a lot of different stuff. It should be an interesting podcast. I've heard a lot of Alien retrospectives out there. I don't know that I've ever seen one that did the whole series that did them both like that, so we're doing that for you guys. Hope you're enjoying the series. You can find more entries in our film podcast at our website, continuousplaypodcast.com/movies. You can link to us on our social media pages there, Facebook and Twitter, and leave us a message on our guest book, and of course find the other things that we reviewed too. And we'd really appreciate it. Leave us a review on iTunes. Let us know what you think of the podcast. Hook up with us, and if you disagree with something we have said, or come to a conclusion come to a different conclusion than we have in some of this, let us know. We'd like to interact with our fans as always, and we appreciate your support. So until next time, for Nick, I'm Jay. Thanks for tuning in to Filmstrip.
Thanks for listening to Filmstrip and our reviews of the Alien movie franchise.
Still don't understand what you're dealing with, do you?
Visit our website, continuousplaypodcast.com, for more reviews and episodes.
I say we take off, nuke the site from orbit. It's the only way to be sure.
All content used or discussed in this podcast are the property of their respective owners and used under the Fair Use Act, Section 504c2, Title 17.
This is Ripley, last survivor of the Nostromo, signing off.